Chapter 3562. After Li Xiang finished speaking, he looked at the jade bottle that Xiaohua handed to him. After pondering for a bit, he reached out and took it. After all, Xiaohua was right. Something is better than nothing. His nascent soul is weak. Any kind of medicinal pill is fine. Looking at the ugly medicinal pill in his hand, Li Xiang's face revealed a strange expression as expected. However, after he took the soul-nourishing pill, his face became brilliant. At first, he was stunned, then he became ecstatic. Immediately after, he sat down cross-legged and didn't speak anymore. This cultivation lasted for 2 hours. Xiaohua also didn't disturb Li Xiang. He drove the flying carriage down from the sky and flew above the heads of the disciples who were galloping on their horses. Woo-woo! Above Li Xiang's head, a faint buzzing sound could be heard. Then, a whirlwind appeared in midair. The whirlwind grew bigger and bigger, from a few feet wide to several feet wide. Then, the pressure of a yuanying stage cultivator appeared and spread out in all directions. Xiaohua didn't care, but Li Xiang's disciples below him were overjoyed. One by one, they pulled their horses and waited on the ground. Under Li Xiang's pressure, the horses' hooves trembled, as if they couldn't stand steadily. Xiaohua slightly smiled and patted the back of the Pegasus. The Pegasus once again soared into the sky and flew for several hundred feet before stopping. Li Xiang's pressure continued to increase. In the end, even the Pegasus was somewhat uneasy, snorting from its mouth and nose. Xiaohua slightly frowned, pondering whether he should wake Li Xiang or not. Fortunately, after another moment, Li Xiang slowly opened his eyes. That pressure was immediately absorbed into Li Xiang's Niwen Palace like a falling tide. Congratulations, fellow Taoist Li, Xiaohua said with a smile. Alas, I still have to thank Taoist Master Xiao. Li Xiang couldn't help but sigh again. I underestimated Taoist Master's so-called gold core medicinal pill. It actually has such a strong healing effect on my divine sense. I feel that my divine sense is going to have a breakthrough again. Then I have to congratulate fellow Taoist even more, Xiaohua said. There's still many in the jade bottle, enough for fellow Taoists to use. And I'm now even more curious about fellow Taoist's clearly pill. Li Xiang couldn't help but open the other jade bottle and poured out an equally ugly clearly pill. Xiaohua smiled and said, Fellow Taoist, you should stay here first. Fellow Taoist disciple is very concerned about you. These children have really suffered under this Li. Li Xiang's face revealed a smile when he mentioned his disciples. As the heavenly horse landed, Li Xiang and the rest of his disciples were all laughing and congratulating their imperial advisor. In reality, their master's cultivation had recovered. Li Xiang said a few words of encouragement, and everyone continued to move forward. In anticipation, Li Xiang took the Clear Li Dan, but this time the Clear Li Dan did not give Li Xiang a special surprise. Although the medicinal power of the Clear Li Dan was very good, it was just a drop in the bucket for a yuanying stage cultivator. Seeing that Li Xiang had only opened his eyes for a moment, Xiaohua naturally knew that Li Xiang was disappointed. However, he just smiled and didn't say anything. How could he not take a good pill himself? Although he had the metal essence thriving marrow now, he did not dare to give it to Li Xiang. Spiritual items of heaven and earth were not something that ordinary cultivators could use at will. Although Li Xiang's meridians were tough, they were still far from Xiaohua's. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth contained in the metal essence, thriving marrow, would definitely cause Li Xiang's meridians to collapse like a mountain flood. As for the 5 Qi righteous thunder, not to mention Li Xiang's yuanying, even if Li Xiang used his own life magic treasure, he would not be able to resist it. Wanting to use the 5 Qi righteous thunder to refine his yuanying was simply dreaming. Li Xiang was helpless and could only continue to take the Clear Li Dan. After a few days, the Black Cloud Ridge was already in sight. Along the way, there were no pursuers from the Copper Pillar State. Instead, they met a few groups of Confucian cultivators. Confucian cultivators were indeed somewhat different from Taoist disciples. Most of the Confucian cultivators only revealed admiration in their eyes. They took a few more glances at Xiao Hua's heavenly horse and flying chariot, but did not look for trouble. Only 2 or 3 people who were obviously reindeer followed for a while. When Xiao Hua sighed with emotion, they were frightened by Li Xiang's spiritual sense and fled. This is the Black Cloud Ridge. Although he had yet to reach the Black Cloud Ridge, Li Xiang could not help but release his spiritual sense. After all, Li Xiang naturally knew the original appearance of the Black Cloud Ridge, and even knew about the Black Cloud Ridge's origin stone mines. Furthermore, when he was at the previous Jade Mountain, Xiao Hua had already mentioned the Black Cloud Ridge, so how could Li Xiang not be curious? Seeing the current appearance of the Black Cloud Ridge, Li Xiang did not want to be surprised, but he was still surprised. How could this be the Black Cloud Ridge in his impression? Xiao Hua laughed and said, "This is naturally not the real Black Cloud Ridge. Fellow Taoist Li, take a closer look." Oh! Li Xiang was slightly startled. He released his spiritual sense again and carefully probed, but after a full meal, Li Xiang suddenly raised his eyebrows, opened his mouth, as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he did not say anything. He looked again, and in the end he sighed deeply and said, "The Taoist master actually set up a great formation in the entire Black Cloud Ridge. This is truly something that I would never have dreamed of. Even the entire Jiang country would not be able to complete it." Haha. Xiao Hua laughed and urged the heaven horse to descend. Li Xiang suddenly thought of something and hurriedly asked, "Oh right, this Black Cloud Ridge is underground. There seems to be an origin stone mine. Jiang country, Copper Pillar country, and Jiasa country are mining it separately. Let's not talk about the Copper Pillar country. What about the Jiasa country?" Naturally, they were chased away by this Xiao. Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, "Previously, the soldiers of the Jiang country had all submitted to the Jiasa country after the destruction of the Jiang country. Why would I keep them?" Oh! Li Xiang nodded absent-mindedly. He finally understood what Xiao Hua meant when he said, "I've done a lot of things that make Confucian cultivators jealous." This origin stone mine was probably even more eye-catching than the Zhu family's inheritance, right? Furthermore, Xiao Hua had even openly offended the Jiasa country, which was the closest to the Black Cloud Ridge and was established by the Buddhist sect. Seeing that they were getting closer and closer to the Black Cloud Ridge and did not see any spirit demon patrolling, Xiao Hua was a little displeased. He raised his hand and was about to cast a spell when he heard a sharp eagle cry from high up in the sky. 2 shadows that were about 3 meters in size descended from the clouds, and the wings of the 2 birds of prey blocked the sunlight above Xiao Hua and the others. Ayo, that's right. There are still 3 demon kings in the Black Cloud Ridge. Li Xiang suddenly realized, could it be that Taoist master Xiao killed them all? Is this Xiao that cruel? Xiao Hua pinched his chin, looking very innocent. The 2 birds of prey circled a few times above Xiao Hua's head, and with 2 cries, they descended towards the Black Cloud Ridge. A moment later, the 2 birds of prey charged into the sky again, still hidden behind the clouds. On the Black Cloud Ridge, light suddenly flashed, and the scene in front of everyone's eyes twisted strangely a few times. From midair to the ground, a crack dozens of meters in size appeared out of nowhere. This crack was like a large door, flowing with light and splendor. The 3 demon kings brought a dozen little demons, and behind them, Qin Xiaoyao, Xiao Jian, Chongling, and the others flew out, respectfully standing on both sides of the door. When Xiao Hua's horse landed, they all bowed and said, "Welcome back, master! Get up, see who's here." Xiao Hua smiled and stood up, helping everyone up, and flew down from the flying carriage with Li Xiang. Junior greets Taoist Master Li. We greet State Preceptor Li. The Black Bear Spirit and the others ignored Li Xiang. Qin Xiaoyao, the Chongling Princess, and the other people of Jiang country were very happy to see Li Xiang and hurriedly bowed. "Haha, all of you get up." Li Xiang waved his hand, looking much more practiced than Xiao Hua. He said with a smile, "Seeing you all safe and sound, this old man is reassured." Then Li Xiang bowed to the Chongling Princess alone and said, "This Li greets the princess." The Chongling princess's eyes were slightly red, and she hurriedly returned the greeting. State preceptor, no need to be so courteous. Chongling is no longer a princess. In the future, I will have to rely on state preceptor and master. Ha! The Chongling princess's words naturally had a double meaning, but Li Xiang did not respond. As they spoke, Li Xiang's disciples arrived on their horses. Qin Xiaoyao and the others were very happy and hurried forward to greet them, helping them down from their horses. Xiaoyao, help arrange for Taoist Master Li's disciples. We will talk in the cave. Xiaohua looked at the joyful crowd and ordered. Yes, this disciple knows. Qin Xiaoyao immediately answered. Also, Black Bear, prepare a banquet to welcome Taoist Master Li and the others. Yes, this lowly one knows. Old Master, do not worry. The Black Bear's spirit patted his chest and left with the golden eagle and white lion. Li Xiang looked at the orderly black cloud ridge and the appearance of the three Yao kings. He was filled with curiosity. These Yao could be called kings. Their strength spoke for themselves, and their personalities were unruly. It was easy to kill them, but difficult to make them lower themselves. He did not understand how Xiaohua had done it. After entering the cave, the people of Black Cloud Ridge took their seats. Lu Yi and Wang Yifei stood on either side of Xiaohua. Little Silver and the Divine Power Centipede did not go back into the space and stayed on their shoulders. Li Xiang's seat was not far from Xiaohua's. It was a guest seat. Li Xiang was very satisfied and sat down as well. Looking at the magnificent cave, he sighed, Spiritual Master Xiao, I've been to this Black Cloud Ridge before. It was not like this at all. I didn't expect that in Spiritual Master Zhao's hands, it would turn something rotten into something magical. Haha, this is not my doing. Xiaohua laughed and said, This is a big gift from Lung Qinga. Saying this, Xiaohua told him about the situation of Lung Qinga setting up the array in Black Cloud Ridge, and then briefly described what had happened. Finally, he glanced at the cave and said, Taoist Master Li, now everything is ready in Black Cloud Ridge. We only need one thing to help Princess Ling establish her country. Can you give me a hand? This, Li Xiang smiled bitterly, knowing that what was to come would come in the end. Although his cultivation had been restored, many of his disciples had not. Xiaohua had used this weakness to make him submit, so he really couldn't refuse. However, he didn't want to repeat the same mistakes as before, so he tried to shirk the responsibility. This matter is of great importance, so let this Li carefully consider it. Chapter 3563. And that's true. Xiaohua did not care and said with a smile, When this old man goes to the Jade Pavilion Conference, the matter of guarding Black Cloud Ridge is of great importance. Xiaoyao's cultivation is not enough, and this old man is worried. So this old man wants to ask fellow Taoist to help this old man. Since fellow Taoist wants to consider, then wait until this old man recovers fellow Taoist disciples' cultivation and tell this old man when we depart. Li Xiang gaped and said curiously, Taoist wants I to help you guard for a few days? Yes. What does fellow Taoist think this old man means by asking fellow Taoist to help this old man? Xiaohua pretended to be surprised. Oh, Li Xiang was slightly confused. He had not expected Xiaohua's request to be so low that he could not respond. The Chongling princess did not lose the chance to say in a low voice, Old Master, Imperial Tutor means, oh, this old man understands. Xiaohua slapped his forehead and said with a smile, Fellow Taoist Li, do not think too much. This old man is not good at state affairs and has no experience as an Imperial Tutor. Chongling once said that they would ask fellow Taoist Li to come out again to be the second Imperial Tutor of Jiang Country. So this old man had Xiaoyao investigate fellow Taoist whereabouts, and this old man came to Jade Mountain. However, this old man saw that fellow Taoist was not interested in being an Imperial Tutor, so this old man did not mention it. Whether fellow Taoist Li becomes an Imperial Tutor has nothing to do with this old man. This will depend on Chongling's charm. This old man will not interfere. Even if fellow Taoist is not willing to stay in Black Cloud Ridge after the banquet, this old man will immediately help fellow Taoist recover his disciple's cultivation, and fellow Taoist can take his disciple and leave Black Cloud Ridge. Heh. With the power of Black Cloud Ridge's formation, this old man believes that Xiao Yao and the others can last until this old man returns from the Jade Pavilion Conference. Old Master, do not worry. This disciple is indebted to Old Master for saving my life, and will not hesitate to die for Old Master. Qin Xiaoyao hurriedly got up and answered with one knee on the ground. Li Xiang's face burned. He naturally knew that Qin Xiaoyao's words were meant for him to hear, but he couldn't refute it. What Qin Xiaoyao said was the truth. Moreover, Qin Xiaoyao was his junior disciple. If Qin Xiaoyao could say such words, then what should he do with the help of Xiao Hua? Fortunately, without waiting for Li Xiang to think more, Xiao Hua smiled and said, I understand your thoughts. Everyone has the right to choose. I will never force people. Let's go. I think the banquet at Black Bear's side has already been set up. Today, we will only welcome Jinren Li with a feast. Nothing else. With that, Xiao Hua pulled Li Xiang's hand and walked out of the cave. Since ancient times, there had never been a banquet that was not perfect, and there were naturally no guests who did not enjoy themselves. Even the legendary Hongmen banquet was the same, and the Black Cloud Ridge's banquet was no exception. After a night of drinking, the spirit demons were lying all over the mountains and plains, and it was truly unsightly. The soldiers of Jiang country were still considered reserved. In the morning, they faced the morning sun and spat out the old and accepted the new. Taoist Master Xiao. Standing in front of the cave, Li Xiang smiled and said to Xiao Hua, Qin Xiaoyao and the others submitting to Taoist Master is not out of my expectations. But the 3 demon kings of the Black Cloud Ridge and their demon soldiers submitting to Taoist Master is out of my expectations. These demons, to be honest, if Taoist Master Xiao does not restrain them enough, it will cause a lot of trouble for Taoist Master. Yes, this Xiao knows. Xiao Huan nodded and pointed at the demons, saying, These demons have submitted to this Xiao the most, and have always been in fear. Previously, there was Lung Chinga forcing them from behind, and then there was the Confucian cultivators formation killing them. Recently, I heard from the Black Bear spirit that many Confucian cultivators have begun to have designs on the Black Cloud Ridge. This old man is unwilling to let Qin Xiaoyao and the others go out to face the enemy, so these demons have to take the lead. Although the casualties are not great, these demons need to vent their emotions. A banquet should be useful. Of course, Taoist Master Li's reminder is in my heart. Since these demons have submitted to my fortune gate, this Xiao will definitely restrain them and not harm the hidden immortal continent. Hearing Xiao Hua mention the fortune gate, Li Xiang was not surprised. After all, the current fortune gate's outer disciples were all Tao cultivators from Jiang country. He had only been in the Black Cloud Ridge for half a day, and he already knew a lot of things. Li Xiang thought for a moment and said, Taoist Master Xiao, this Li has an idea, but I don't know if I should say it. Please speak. Xiao Hua laughed. He was eager for Li Xiang to say more. The hidden immortal continent forbids Tao sect disciples from establishing sects. This is public opinion. Although Taoist Master Zhao's cultivation is profound, compared to the accumulation of Confucian cultivators who have been passed down for who knows how many years, there is still a big gap. Li Xiang did not hide anything and said, Taoist Master Xiao certainly wants to establish a Tao sect, but in a situation where we cannot fight against the entire hidden immortal continent, it is very inappropriate to rashly bring up the fortune gate. Oh, then what does Taoist Master think? Xiao Hua frowned, his face full of worry. Li Xiang laughed and said, Since it is not allowed to establish a sect, then take charge of country. Now that Jiang country has been destroyed, if Taoist Master Xiao establishes Jiang country again, naturally you can name it Fortune Country. You can even call it Xiao Country. Taoist Master Xiao is building this country into an empire with vast territory. Taoist Master Li. Xiao Hua interrupted Li Xiang's words, shaking his head and saying, This Xiao has already promised the Chongling princess to help her restore her country. Wouldn't doing this chill her heart? This Xiao also become a person who goes back on his words? That's even simpler. Li Xiang laughed and said, Taoist Master Xiao can just support another country. Yes, that's true. Xiao Hua woke from a dream, slapped his forehead, but then he grimaced. The problem isn't controlling a country different from a sect? There has to be a country ruler. If there's a country ruler, wouldn't there be a rift between us? Li Xiang laughed and said, Use Taoist Master Zhao's own bloodline to be the country ruler. This Xiao country is justified. Forget it, let's talk about it later. As Xiao Hua spoke, he actually walked into the trap. He simply waved his hand and said, This Xiao made a sect to simplify things, to be a hands-off shopkeeper. Now that I heard Taoist Master Li say that he also wants to marry and have children, wouldn't that be troublesome? Ha ha! Li Xiang also laughed. The two spoke a few more words. Seeing the sun rise from the mountain peak, Xiao Hua smiled and said, Taoist Master Li, send a disciple up. You and I will see how to help them recover their cultivation. All right. Li Xiang saw that Xiao Hua was so straightforward and was happy in his heart. He transmitted his voice, and not long after, Jindan disciple came up. Xiao Hua took Li Xiang and the disciple into the quiet room. Xiao Hua only slightly checked the injury and already understood that this disciple's Jindan was broken. His lower dantian was pierced by the sword qi of the Confucian cultivator, and some of the meridians in his body were also cut off by the sword qi. As long as the meridians and dantian were repaired, Jindan would not be difficult. So Xiao Hua pretended to discuss with Li Xiang for a moment, took out the heaven-mending pill, explained to Li Xiang how to use it, and let Li Xiang help his disciple. Li Xiang looked at the pill in his hand, his mouth bitter. How could he not understand that as long as he had this heaven-mending pill, why would he need to do it himself? Why would Xiao Hua need to discuss with him? He really couldn't understand how many elixirs could Xiao Hua have in this small Chinquan bag. After the disciple took the heaven-mending pill, Li Xiang used his divine sense to explore for a moment. He knew that the heaven-mending pill's effect was godly, and it was repairing the meridians and dantian at a speed visible to the naked eye. But then Li Xiang worriedly asked, Taoist Master Xiao, this pill is really miraculous, but do you know how many enough? Seeing this, Xiao Hua simply clapped his hand, and a sufficient number of jade bottles were sent in front of Li Xiang. Li Xiang was so shocked that a walnut could be stuffed in his mouth. A single heaven-mending pill was already incomparably precious, but Xiao Hua actually gave him dozens of pills the moment he opened his mouth. Too much, Li Xiang muttered. His raised hand was as heavy as 1,000 caddies. The jade bottles were easy to put away, but his heart was too heavy. No matter, Xiao Hua said with a smile. Everyone in Black Cloud Ridge is more precious than this pill. Hearing Xiao Hua's words that did not treat him as an outsider, and thinking back to Qin Haoyue's guarded appearance, Li Xiang's heart was somewhat shaken. Taoist Master Li, you help the disciples recover their cultivation here. I will go take a look at the Source Stone mine. Xiao Hua stood up and said with a smile, That is the vital point of Black Cloud Ridge. We cannot lose it. After saying this, without waiting for Li Xiang to speak, Xiao Hua stood up and walked out of the quiet room. Outside the quiet room, Lu Yi and Wang Bianfei stood below the high platform, both sitting cross-legged with their eyes slightly closed. Wang Bianfei was somewhat lively as he scurried around, but the God Power Centipede was quite well behaved as it lay on the ground, the black chi around its body expanding and contracting as if it was breathing, as if it was cultivating. Seeing this, Xiao Hua smiled mightily. With a wave of his hand, Little Silver and the God Power Centipede both flew onto his shoulder. Then, Xiao Hua rode a magic cloud and flew towards the Source Stone mine. Fortunately, although many of the demons in the front mountain had not yet sobered up, the entrance to the Source Stone mine was guarded by a white lion. From time to time, demons would enter and exit the mine, and it looked like they were mining source stones. Seeing Xiao Hua fly over, The white lion immediately came over and respectfully greeted him. "Greetings, master." "Rise, white lion," Xiao Hua said with a smile. "Why are you up so early? Didn't you drink last night?" Hearing Xiao Hua mention wine, the white lion unconsciously stuck out its scarlet tongue and licked its lips. Smiling, it said, "Master, of course this little one drank. However, this little one felt that the spirit wine that Master bestowed upon this little one was rather rare, so I left some for my subordinates who profited from it. I didn't enjoy much of it myself. Moreover, it's this little one's turn to be on duty today. This little one didn't dare to delay Master's matters, so I came early." Good. Xiao Hua was very happy to hear this. Although the black bear spirit was loyal, it was really lazy and especially timid. This white lion, on the other hand, seemed to be a cautious and attentive one. Saying this, Xiao Hua flipped his hand and took out a jade pot, handing it to the white lion. "This is a reward from this old man." The spirit wine in Xiao Hua's space was now brewed by Xiao Guo out of boredom. The wine's fragrance assailed the nostrils, and the color was sparkling and translucent. It was who knew how many times better than the wine brewed by ordinary cultivators. No wonder a demon like the white lion was greedy. Chapter 3564. Thank you for your reward, Master. White Lion was overjoyed and received the wine with both hands. His Adam's apple unconsciously gulped a few times. "How's the situation at the elemental stone mine?" Xiao Hua asked after White Lion kept the wine. White Lion explained the situation of the elemental stone mine in detail. Xiao Hua actually didn't know how the real elemental stone mine was mined, but hearing White Lion's orderly explanation, he nodded repeatedly. White Lion was even more delighted to see Xiao Hua's approval. After White Lion finished speaking, he saw a few more demons coming out of the cave with cloth bags and other items in their hands. When they reached a place not far from the cave, they shook their hands and opened the cloth bags. A large pile of bones tumbled out. Xiao Hua frowned and scanned with his divine sense. His expression changed unconsciously, and he said in a cold voice, "White Lion, what's with this pit full of bones?" "Oh," reported to Master. White Lion wasn't afraid and smiled. "These were all cleared out from the elemental stone mine. I'm afraid that the mine soldiers of the 3 kingdoms died in the mine and were casually thrown in here. When we saw these bones while mining, we told Big Brother. Big Brother knows that Master is kind and likes cleanliness, so he asked us to clear these bones out and place them in this pit. When the time comes, we'll bury them all." "Good, you've worked hard." Xiao Hua patted White Lion's shoulder and encouraged, "I'll go find some cultivation methods that demons can cultivate and teach you in the future." Thank you, Master." White Lion was excited and immediately knelt on the ground and cowed out. Although they were demon kings, in reality, they were just small leaders of the demons. They relied on their talent and didn't have any particularly complete cultivation methods. Wanting to improve their strength was simply a dream. White Lion had a deep understanding of Xiao Hua's cultivation. Moreover, in Xiao Hua's eyes, there was no difference between demons and humans. Since he said that he would guide them in their cultivation, he would naturally guide them. This was much more practical than some kind of spiritual wine or any so-called bestowment. "Get up," Xiao Hua says with a smile. "This old man is just talking about it now. This old man doesn't even know where to find the cultivation technique that the evil spirit cultivates." Speaking up to this point, Xiao Hua's mind flashed as he came to a realization. That's right, the Copper Pillar Nation's star-plucking tower, other nations must also have their own auctions. My Black Cloud Ridge has an elemental or mine. Why would I be afraid of not being able to find cultivation techniques? Bai Shi, tell He Xiong about this, and then discuss it with Qin Xiaoyao or Xiao Jian. Let them send some disciples out to bid. Yes, I understand, Bai Shi replied respectfully. Soon after, Xiao Hua entered the Essence Stone mine and went to the deepest part. He collected more Essence Stones before coming up. In just a dozen days, Xiao Hua's mind and primordial spirit had improved greatly. The amount of Essence Stones he collected was more than 10% more than the previous time. While Xiao Hua was overjoyed, he couldn't help but be dumbfounded. The effect of this secret technique far surpassed any secret technique he had ever seen. He really didn't know where Doshan Jun had obtained this mysterious secret technique. Could it be that my appearance can't compare to that guy's, and my character can't compare to his? After Xiao Hua cursed in his heart, he flew to the front of Dao Shan's tomb. Dao Shan's tomb already had weeds, but fortunately, when the 5-brocade cloud diagram array bombarded the Black Cloud Ridge, this place was not affected too much, and the tomb was still there. Xiao Hua squatted down, extended his hand, and pulled out the weeds near the tomb one by one. He stared at the small tomb for a long time, as if he was thinking about something, but also as if he was comprehending something. After half a day, he finally stood up and flew towards the cave. However, before he could reach the cave, Xiao Hua stopped again. He saw that not far from the cave was a military camp, and on the east side of the military camp was a hill that wasn't too steep. Right now, there was a person holding an axe and dancing on the side of the hill. Who else could this person be other than Yuanya? Xiao Hua watched for a moment and saw that Yuanya's axe technique was extremely methodical. It was obvious that someone had taught him. He couldn't help but smile and descended from the sky. Yuanya was the first person he saw in the hidden immortal continent. Now that there were many people in the Black Cloud Ridge, Xiao Hua didn't have time to care about Yuanya. Previously, he had asked Lu Yi once, but there was no news. Dao, Master. Hearing the commotion, Yuanya put away the demon axe, hurriedly bowed, and called out. It seemed that he was going to call him Taoist Master, but when he was about to say it, he changed his words. Looking at Yuanya, Xiao Hua was quite emotional. People would always change. It had only been a little more than a year. A young man who was lying on a tree in the Jiangqiao temple and peeking at him practicing his fist techniques now knew how to deal with people and adapt to changes. Yeah, how are you now? Xiao Hua said with a smile. Master, this one is very well. Yuanya did not speak much, and his answers were very proper. Xiao Hua knew Yuanya's personality and asked, What about Chongling? How is her in your master's plan to revive the country? Why are you not with her? Master, Chongling and Master are working day and night and have sent out many soldiers and also issued many orders. Looking at Chongling, it seems to be going smoothly. The smile on her face is increasing. As to the exact extent, this one does not know. This one can only cultivate as much as possible so that I can protect her on the battlefield in the future. Who taught you this axe technique? It looks very good. Xiao Hua asked with interest. General Kong Li taught me. Xiao Hua chatted with Yuanya for a while, and then asked probingly that Chongling still does not admit that she is Diawu. You did not think that you were mistaken? At the mention of Diawu, Yuanya was slightly bashful. He said with a smile, Master, this one will not be mistaken. However, right now, Chongling is focused on reviving the country. This one cannot distract her. After Jiang country revives, let's talk about it. You are very right. Xiao Hua nodded and then said, However, you also need to focus on cultivating and protecting Chongling for Elder Mo. If there is nothing, you need to be by her side. You may not be able to ask about her well-being, but if you see her unhappy, you can think of ways to make her happy. Master, this one does not understand. Yuanya's face was slightly red as he answered honestly. Xiao Hua was speechless and said helplessly, All right, you should cultivate. If you have any questions about cultivation, you can ask Qin Xiaoyao or Lu Yi. If that does not work, come find this old man. All right, Master, Yuanya answered. This one has nothing to ask for now. All right then. Xiao Hua knew that it was boring to talk to Yuanya, but he had not expected it to be even more boring now. He could only wave his hand and fly into the air. Yuanya did not respectfully send Master off like the black bear spirit. He looked at Xiao Hua's back and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, a smile from the bottom of his heart. When he returned to the residence, only Li Xiang was sitting cross-legged in the seclusion room. His disciples were gone. They must have taken the sky-mending pill and been chased out by Li Xiang. Seeing Xiao Hua return, Li Xiang hurriedly stood and took out several jade bottles. He said with a smile, This one's disciples have taken Taoist Zhao's spirit pills. These are the remaining ones. Taoist, please accept them. Haha, Taoist Li, there's no need to be so courteous with this one. Xiao Hua waved his hand, resolutely refusing to accept. Our friendship is still shallow. You don't know this, but this Xiao will never let go of anything that falls into this Xiao's hands, and this Xiao will never accept anything that this Xiao gives away. All right, since Taoist Xiao is so straightforward, then this one will accept. Li Xiang did not say much. He put away the jade bottles and said, Taoist Xiao, this one and my disciples are indebted to you for saving our lives. Moreover, this one and my disciples have not fully recovered, so it is not safe for us to go elsewhere. Therefore, this one has decided to accept Taoist Zhao's invitation and stay in the Black Cloud Ridge for a while until Taoist Xiao returns from the Jade Pavilion gathering. Good. Xiao Hua clapped his hands and said, Thank you, Taoist Li. However, I still have a condition. Li Xiang said with a straight face. Xiao Hua was stunned and said curiously, Taoist Li, please speak. If this one can satisfy you, this one will definitely agree. The spirit wine that Taoist Xiao took out yesterday tasted very good. This one does not have many hobbies, but I like to taste wine. Li Xiang blinked and said, If Taoist Xiao asks this one to stay, then I will need a jar of spirit wine every day. Haha, no problem. Xiao Hua did not expect Li Xiang to joke with him. He clapped his hands and took out a few jade bottles and said with a smile, Taoist Li, please taste these first. When this one goes to the Jade Pavilion gathering, I will leave behind enough spirit wine. Thank you. Li Xiang did like the spirit wine, but fundamentally speaking, it was just an excuse. Why would he care if Xiao Hua took out more spirit wine? He reached out to take the spirit wine and agreed to the matter. Soon after, Xiao Hua sat down again. He waved his hand and took out a row of magic tools. He said with a smile, Not only the spirit wine, this one also has some magic tools. Taoist Li, please take a look. Which ones are suitable for your disciples? Li Xiang was startled. Any cultivator's magic tool, if it wasn't bestowed by their masters, then it was obtained by their own luck. Gifts from others were extremely rare. For someone like Xiao Hua, who gave away a pile of magic tools in one go, other than those unrated magic tools used by Dao soldiers, which cultivators' magic tools could be given away like this. If Xiao Hua regarded his disciples as Taoist soldiers, wouldn't that be slapping his own face? However, Li Xiang knew that Xiao Hua was not such a mean person. Moreover, with a sweep of his divine sense, he immediately knew the rarity of these magic tools. Li Xiang hurriedly stood up and waved his hand, saying, Taoist Xiao, this one and this one's disciples have received too much help from Taoist Xiao. Why don't Taoists keep these magic tools in your hands and wait for a fated person in the future? Taoist Li, what is fated? What is not fated? Xiao Hua said with a smile. Taoist Xiao's disciples meeting this one is fated. This one has these magic tools in his hands is fated. Why is Taoist Xiao so polite? Alas, okay. Li Xiang casually picked up a magic tool and looked at it carefully. He found that this magic tool was definitely refined by a great refiner. It was far better than what he had seen before. Of course, he was not willing to let his disciples lose this opportunity, so he could only grit his teeth and agree. Chapter 3565. Xiao Hua smiled and said, It's a pity that I don't have the magic treasure you want, and I'm afraid that none of your Jindan disciples are suitable. My magic treasure was taken away by Lung Qinga. I'm afraid it's sealed somewhere in the Bronze Pillar State. Li Xiang smiled bitterly. After I recover my cultivation, I'll go to the Bronze Pillar State and maybe I can get it. As for my useless Jindan disciples, let them find a few magic treasures to use first. Xiao Hua nodded. You can tell Xiao Yao about this, and let him go to the auction to buy some suitable magic treasures. I know. Li Xiang nodded, and then Xiao Hua asked Lu Yi to call on Li Xiang's many disciples. Each disciple chose a magic treasure. These disciples, including the Jindan disciples, all had joy in their eyes. They all bowed and thanked Xiao Hua. After the disciples left, Li Xiang returned the rest of the magic treasures to Xiao Hua and said, Jinren Xiao, I heard you say that you're going to the Yaotai gathering. How much do you know about it? Xiao Hua slightly shakes his head. I know very little about the Yaotai gathering, other than knowing that we Taoist cultivators must participate in the Yaotai gathering if we want to be teachers of country. Here is the approximate location of the Yaotai gathering. Li Xiang nodded, looked at Xiao Hua, and said word by word, If I hadn't been to the Black Cloud Ridge before, maybe I would have advised you to go to the Yaotai gathering. But look at the current situation of the Black Cloud Ridge. Look at Jinren Zhao's spirit of killing the state preceptor of the Bronze Pillar State. And I heard that Jinren Xiao also erected a Taoist stone tablet in the Bronze Pillar State. I advise you not to go to the Yaotai gathering and walk into a trap. Xiao Hua was shocked. He knew that Li Xiang was the state preceptor of the Li Kingdom and must have participated in the Yaotai gathering. He wanted to ask for advice, but he didn't expect Li Xiang to advise him not to go. He also said that the Yaotai gathering was a trap, which really confused him. What does Jinrenli mean? Xiao Hua asked in a low voice. To tell you the truth, Jinren Xiao, when I went to the Yaotai gathering to fight for the position of the state preceptor, I had the same idea as Jinren Xiao. I wanted to be an influential figure on the hidden immortal continent and make achievements that no one before me could achieve. Li Xiang's eyes flashed with a trace of fanaticism, as if he was recalling his glorious days. However, this fanaticism disappeared in a flash, followed by helplessness and bitterness. It's a pity that we took the wrong path from the beginning. How could we reach the peak if the direction was wrong? Xiao Hua looked at Li Xiang with a smile and didn't interrupt him. Li Xiang looked like he was in his 20s. Presumably, he had altered his appearance after reaching the nascent soul stage. However, from his tone, he seemed to have experienced a lot. Xiao Hua also knew that Li Xiang was a person with a story and had more experience than him. Calmly listening to his thoughts would be of great benefit to him. Taoist master Xiao isn't the first person to walk the path of Taoism on the continent of Confucian cultivators, and he definitely won't be the last. Li Xiang opened his mouth again. Once upon a time, this Li also had the same idea. I wanted to establish a Taoist sect, raise Taoist cultivators, become the master of a country, and build a Taoist empire. Unfortunately, the Yaotai gathering pushed this Li to the bottom of the valley. Although this Li was lucky enough to obtain the lot to establish a country. The Li country's downfall made this Li completely lose the heart to contend for hegemony. What's going on with the Yaotai gathering? Xiao Hua's brows furrowed even tighter. What Qin Xiaoyao said before was originally unclear. Xiao Hua thought it would be enough for him to go take a look and register with his own cultivation. Who knew it would be so troublesome? Xiao Hua couldn't help but ask, what exactly is the Yaotai gathering like? It seems to be different every time. The Yaotai gathering that Qin Haoyue and this Li participated in was different. After all, 10 years of planning is enough for the Immortal Palace to come up with many sinister ideas to kill nascent Taoist cultivators. Even if this Li told you, it might not be useful. It might even be harmful to you. Li Xiang shook his head and said, with Taoist Master Zhao's cultivation, it's best not to participate in it. 10 years? The Immortal Palace? Xiao Hua was shocked. He asked curiously. Qin Xiaoyao said it's once every 5 years. How did it become 10 years? Moreover, isn't this a matter of the Confucian cultivators of the hidden immortal continent? How is it related to the Immortal Palace? Besides, as far as this Xiao knows, the Immortal Palace doesn't intervene in the specific affairs of the hidden immortal continent. Li Xiang sneered. What Taoist Master Xiao knows is just the tip of the iceberg outside the glacier. Under the glacier, how can ordinary people know the full picture of the iceberg? The hidden immortal continent is the continent of Confucian cultivators, and the Immortal Palace is the holy land of Confucian cultivators. If the Immortal Palace doesn't control the hidden immortal continent, could it be that the Lane Temple controls the hidden immortal continent? 5 years is a very long time for ordinary people, but for cultivators, it's just a blink of an eye. How can cultivators grow up? Only once every 10 years can the Immortal Palace harvest their energy. Xiaohua instantly understood a little. He narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice, "So, this Xiao understands. The so-called Yaodai Gathering is a grand event for the immortal palace to strangle the kindling of Taoism, and the position of the state preceptor is the bait." Since that's the case, why? Yes, since you know it's the bait, why hasn't Taoist Master Xiao dispelled the idea of participating at this time? Li Xiang said with a smile. It's because this bait is really tempting. Of course, we can't rule out that many Taoism disciples don't know the inside story. Even this Li doesn't have any real evidence. Everything is just this Li's own speculation. Lucky thoughts, considerable expectations, unbearable curiosity all make people overlook the potential danger. Xiaohua nodded and sighed. Taoist Master Xiao, have you heard of the Yaoqi gathering? Li Xiang suddenly asked. Xiaohua shook his head. This Xiao is rather ignorant and inexperienced. Previously, I was concentrating on cultivation, so I really don't know about this. It said that as long as a Confucian cultivator can cultivate to the sage realm, they can receive the invitation of Emperor Go-chun and Empress Dongming to participate in the Heavenly Bestowal Banquet. Because this Heavenly Bestowal Banquet is held at Empress Dongming's Yaoqi Pool, it's also called the Yaoqi Gathering. Li Xiang explained, participating in the Yaoqi Gathering means that the Confucian cultivator has an extraordinary status and has obtained the recognition of the Heavenly Palace. And the Yaotai Gathering imitates the Yaoqi Gathering. As long as a Taoist cultivator participates in the Yaotai Gathering, they can be considered to have obtained the recognition of Confucian cultivators, which is to say, the Heavenly Palace. This kind of idea of learning both civil and martial arts and selling them to the imperial family is actually the idea of Confucian cultivators. When it's put on the heads of Taoism cultivators, it's already changing the concept of cultivators. Li Xiang said again, actually, Taoist Master, think about it again. As a country's teacher, participating in the affairs of the country, isn't it the Confucian cultivator's way of entering the world? It's completely different from the emergence of our Taoism. If Taoist Master becomes the state teacher, isn't it because you've fallen into the scheme of Confucian cultivators? How can you still have time to cultivate? How can you still improve your cultivation? Of course, on the hidden immortal continent, it's forbidden to trade high-level Taoist cultivation techniques. However, in the Yaodai Gathering, there are high-level Taoist cultivation techniques as rewards. Taoist Master can certainly obtain this high-level Taoist cultivation technique, but Taoist Master will also become a delicious cake in the eyes of other Taoist cultivators. They'll constantly probe and harass you. How can Taoist Master cultivate calmly? Li Xiang finally spoke his true thoughts. He was advising Xiaohua to give up the idea of establishing a country. Hiss! Xiaohua inhaled sharply. He knew that this was what Li Xiang and the imperial preceptor had seen through. This was also the overt scheme of the Immortal Palace. The brilliance of the Immortal Palace was that 1. They used the competition of the Yaodai Gathering to cut off a portion of Taoist cultivators. 2. They used the name of the imperial preceptor to assimilate a portion of Taoist cultivators. 3. In the competition between countries, Taoist cultivators would fight with Taoist cultivators. 4. They used high-level Taoist cultivation techniques as bait to once again lure Taoist cultivators to kill each other. With such heavy killing, no wonder the hidden immortal continent did not have Taoist cultivators. Different from the Dawn Rain continent, the hidden immortal continent's Taoist sects were still not flourishing. Li Xiang really was sincerely trying to dissuade Xiaohua. Unfortunately, when he saw Xiaohua's expression change from astonishment to calmness, he smiled bitterly again. As long as it was a cultivator, which one of them wasn't a person with a firm will? How could they change their mind based on a few words from others? It seems that Taoist Master Xiao still plans to go to the Yaodai Gathering. Li Xiang asked softly. Xiaohua nodded. Yes, I did not know that the Yaodai Gathering was so particular and rashly agreed to Chongling. Since I have spoken, I cannot go back on it. I must go. Also, I said that I want to establish a sect. If I do not have the mind to move forward and have to avoid even a small Yaodai gathering, how can I stand in the world? Li Xiang shook his head slightly. Hadn't he said such bold words decades ago? Humans, even if they were cultivators, would never give up unless they hit a wall and got a big bump on their head. The Yaotai gathering is held at Yaotai Mountain. It is controlled by an organization called Star Sovereign Hall. The present master of Star Sovereign Hall should be called Kong Hanwu and is a disciple of a first-class scholarly family. This Star Sovereign Hall is said to belong to the scholarly cultivators of the hidden immortal continent, but I do not know who controls it. At the Yaotai gathering, other than the Imperial Tutor's lot, there are also some rare treasures of Yaotai Mountain. Anyone who attends a Yaotai gathering can obtain them. Every few times, Star Sovereign Hall will take out some rare treasures of the hidden immortal continent and put them on Yaotai Mountain for my sect disciples to fight over. On the surface, it looks generous, but in reality, it is to have my sect disciples kill each other. Back then, let's not talk about it. This is my impression of the Yaotai gathering. Li Xiang sighed and took out the jade he had prepared long ago. He handed it to Xiaohua and said, I know that Taoist Master is far stronger than I was back then, but Taoist Master must remember the tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. You must be low-key. Back then at the Yaotai gathering, none of the cultivators who were stronger than I could get the Imperial Tutor's lot. This is my specialty. Xiaohua took the jade eye and answered with a smile. He did not ask more about Star Sovereign Hall and the treasures. If Li Xiang knew, he would remember it in the jade eye. If Li Xiang did not know, it was useless to ask. Chapter 3566. In addition, Taoists shouldn't bring Lu, Yi, and the others. Li Xiang suggested again, their cultivation, not to mention me, even Xiao Yao can guide them. It's quite troublesome for Taoists to bring them along. Good. Xiao Hua clapped his hands. Then I'll have a troubled Taoist, Li. Taoist Xiao, I've learned a lot from you. It's only right for me to do something for you. Li Xiang was helpless towards Xiao Hua's clapping. After all, he was also a nascent soul cultivator. How could he teach two disciples who had just started cultivating? But it seemed that Xiao Hua seemed to enjoy it. Thus, Li Xiang had to hit the nail on the head. Taoists, remember, if something goes wrong, immediately run away. Well said. Xiao Hua smiled. I don't dare to boast about other cultivation, but in terms of running away, if I say I'm second, no one dares to say they're first. Soon after, Xiao Hua called everyone over and made some arrangements. He sat on a flying carriage pulled by a Pegasus and flew out of the Black Cloud Ridge. Everyone shouted and respectfully sent their master off. However, Li Xiang's face was very unhappy. He almost wanted to chase after Xiao Hua and ask, where did the low-key go? The Pegasus shone brightly. Wouldn't it be discovered from far away? At this time, how could Xiao Hua still think about low-key? What he cared about was whether he could smoothly reach the Yaotai assembly. The reason why he brought Lu, Yi, and Wang Yifei along was not to guide them in their cultivation, but to identify the direction and help him find the so-called Jade Pavilion without taking any unnecessary detours. Li Xiang's jade eyes naturally had the location of the Yaotai assembly and the names of the countries around it. However, Li Xiang also made it clear in the jade eyes that he participated in the Yaotai assembly nearly 100 years ago. He didn't know whether these countries still existed or not. The jade eyes mentioned some taboos that Xiao Hua wanted to pay attention to. It was nothing more than keeping a low profile and being on guard. What puzzled Xiao Hua the most was that Li Xiang told him to pay special attention to Taoist cultivators. On the contrary, he didn't say much about Confucian cultivators. This Li Xiang. Xiao Hua withdrew his jade eyes and thought, I'm afraid that once bitten, twice shy. If it's Xiaoyu continent, everyone is Taoist cultivators. Killing each other is not uncommon. But in the hidden immortal continent, Taoist cultivators, after all, are in the minority. If they can join hands, they'll be together. Otherwise, they'll be alone. Wouldn't fall into the scheme of Taoist cultivators? However, just as he sat down cross-legged and was about to cultivate, a thought appeared in his mind. Oh, so that's how it is. I understand. What Li Xiang wanted to say was that the Dao sect cultivators on the hidden immortal continent had limited resources for cultivation, and these limited resources had to be obtained by the Dao sect cultivators themselves. Naturally, they had to guard against each other. Even though some Daoist cultivators practiced Daoist techniques, they were backed by Confucian cultivators and even had the support of the Immortal Palace. They were people who sold dog meat under false pretenses. Naturally, they would be ruthless to the orthodox Daoist cultivators. Daoists say, teet teet teet, it looks like you still don't trust this Xiao. In fact, if Li Xiang was like this, it wasn't that he didn't trust Xiaohua. After all, Li Xiang didn't really understand Xiaohua. Speaking up to this point, it was already very clear. If he said it too bluntly, it might directly insinuate the relationship between Xiaohua and Li Xiang. If Xiaohua had a suspicious heart like Qin Haoyue, wouldn't Li Xiang have made an enemy? Xiaohua sat on the flying carriage, free and unfettered. Now he took out the small bone that Zhu Cheng gave him. First, he looked at it carefully, then he released his soul consciousness. He took it for granted that since it was a bone, it must be his soul cultivator's bone. Xiaohua himself was also curious as to why the Zhu family was related to soul cultivators. In fact, this was the real reason why Xiaohua wanted to visit the Zhu family, not what Li Xiang said. Unfortunately, Xiaohua was wrong. The small bone didn't have any reaction in his soul consciousness. Xiaohua couldn't read anything from a bone. Oh, don't tell me, this thing isn't a bone. Xiaohua was astonished. He then used his soul consciousness and clear eyes technique to investigate, but to no avail. Helpless, Xiaohua opened his Dharma eye. Similarly, the bone in his Dharma eye was empty, without any trace. That's strange. Xiaohua stroked his chin, puzzled. Don't tell me I was deceived by Zhu Cheng. Was this a scheme to transplant flowers for a tree? No, the Zhu family is afraid of the Copper Pillar State, so how could they not be afraid of me? Xiaohua shook his head again. That's right, Buddhist sense. Suddenly, Xiaohua had a kind of understanding in his heart. Zhu, she was a great Confucian cultivator. If he wanted to leave behind the teachings of his ancestors, others would definitely think that Zhu Shi would use the methods of a Confucian cultivator. However, Zhu Shi did the opposite and used the secret technique of a Buddhist sect. This was definitely unexpected by others, right? Thinking of this, Xiaohua released his Buddhist sense. Sure enough, there were some faint spots on the bone. However, with Xiaohua's current Buddhist sense cultivation, he couldn't really see these spots. Finally, Xiaohua sent the bone into his Naiwan palace. Under the Buddhist light of the Buddha Sarara, Xiaohua could see clearly that there were two prophecies on the bone. The ancestral tree is like the innate qi. The family tree is like the silk of the younger generation. Damn it, Zhu Shi is a saint. How could he leave behind something so unclear? It looks symmetrical, but doesn't have any charm. Xiaohua looked at it again and again, puzzled. He couldn't help but curse. Even if that bastard Zhu Cheng made this thing public, what could he do? He wanted to make it public, but Zhu Shi was too ruthless. Even his own descendants couldn't see what was left in the bone. What heavenly book truth? It's more like the heavenly book mystery. Xiaohua now knew how to read the heavenly book. Moreover, he had already cultivated the 5 Qis unifications. He didn't care about this heavenly book truth. He casually put the bone into his space. With a wave of his hand, a scroll appeared in his hand. He was going to read it carefully. Suddenly, a thunderous voice rang in his ears. Fellow Taoist, this humble Taoist greets you. Xiaohua shivered and hurriedly looked around. However, he saw that in the sky, there was nothing but astral wind. There wasn't any divine sense. Fellow Taoist, can you come in for a chat? Just as Xiaohua was puzzled, the voice impatiently sounded in Xiaohua's ear again. Oh, it's the bone-honing Xiaohua. Hearing this impatient voice, Xiaohua immediately understood and hurriedly sent his divine sense into his body. Sure enough, the bone-honing Xiaohua had already stopped practicing the Big Dipper Divine Fist. The golden light on his head was radiating in all directions. The yellow brilliance around his body was also glaring. In particular, the aura of desolation was even thicker. His figure was also much taller than before. Facing such a bone-honing Xiaohua, Jade Archive Xiaohua felt powerless. He helplessly cupped his hands and said, "Fellow Taoist, why did you call I here? I just want to ask you, do you still want to cultivate the light escape?" Only this bone-honing Xiaohua was so impolite to Jade Archive Xiaohua. Xiaohua was stunned. He scratched his head and asked curiously, "What do you mean, fellow Taoist? The light escape is the goal that I pursue. How can I not cultivate it? What the hell are you cultivating for?" Bone-honing Xiaohua's voice seemed to reverberate between heaven and earth. "You found the exquisite pagoda for the Buddha Saraira, as well as the 10,000 Buddha diagram and the Mahavajrokana Buddhist edict. You found the 5 Qi thunder and the heavenly book for the Confucian cultivator Xiaohua. You found the 9 heavens spirit origin and the little white dragon for the soul cultivator Xiaohua. You found the dragon transformation art for the dragon vein Xiaohua. You even found the blood drop paradise and the devil Qi for the devil spirit cultivator Xiaohua. What did you find for me? Is it this devil blade?" While speaking, bone-honing Xiaohua waved his left hand. The devil blade that seemed to grow on his left arm flashed with a pitch-black brilliance. "Doesn't fellow Taoist have the Big Dipper divine fist?" Jade Archive Xiaohua asked curiously. "I remember, there's also the bone-honing technique of the Sunset Island." "Damn, when did the Big Dipper divine fist happen? Are you going to use it for the rest of your life?" Bone-honing Xiaohua shouted angrily. "I'm cultivating the Big Dipper divine fist because I'm too bored and playing around. The Big Dipper divine fist is no longer effective." Jade Archive Xiaohua was shocked, but he understood in a flash. He nodded and said, "That's right, I overlooked this." Bone-honing Xiaohua again exclaimed in disappointment. "Also, the bone-honing technique of the Sunset Island is somewhat effective now, but you should be cultivating it. Why are you holding that bullshit scroll and reading it every day for no reason? Can that thing let you cultivate the light escape technique? Actually, even the bone-honing technique of the Sunset Island has a time when it becomes ineffective. You should also look for a follow-up to that heavenly laws embodiment technique of yours. You can't let me be idle. Moreover, if you don't find a suitable technique, this devil blade of mine will never be removed, and you'll always have a devil hand." That Jade Archive Xiaohua frowned and said, "What if I use the 5 Qi righteous thunder to help fellow Taoists temper your bones? Is that possible?" Of course it's possible to use the 5 Qi righteous thunder. If it's the thunder water in the space, that would be the best. Bone-honing Xiaohua saw that Jade Archive Xiaohua was very sensible, and his tone became somewhat gentle. "I understand." Jade Archive Xiaohua nodded. "This thunder water is beyond I's ability to use outside the body, but I can still do it inside the body. Moreover, fellow Taoist is one with the space, so you should be able to do it. However, this thunder water is too overbearing. Is fellow Taoist sure it's possible?" Fellow Taoist is looking down on me too much." Bone-honing Xiaohua sneered proudly. The golden light around his body flourished, and a strange rune on his forehead made Jade Archive Xiaohua's heart tremble in shock. Perhaps fellow Taoist doesn't even know what the light escape technique is. Fellow Taoist knows, but I don't know? Could it be that fellow Taoist knows what I don't know? Jade Archive Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Bone-honing Xiaohua really thought too highly of himself. Fellow Taoist knows, but fellow Taoist doesn't necessarily think too much. If I don't say it, you may not realize it. Bone-honing Xiaohua's bell-like laughter rang out. Chapter 3567. Bone-honing Xiaohua smiled and explained, "Fellow Taoist was able to freely use the Devil Realm's concealment technique because of fellow Taoist's Big Dipper God Fist. The Big Dipper God Fist should be the Devil Realm's bone tempering technique. The Sunset Island's bone tempering technique originated from the Desolate Era and should belong to the Giant Clan. The Heavenly Laws embodiment technique and the bone tempering technique you obtain from Yellowflower Ridge should be related to the Monster Clan. However, I can't casually practice this bone tempering technique right now. I have to wait until the Sunset Island's bone tempering technique completely tempers me. I understand. Jade Archive, Xiao Hua nodded. One light into 7 colors. 7 colors hide all things. What we need to do now is to use the 7 colors to combine into one light. To be sheltered in the light, we have to go through the 7 bone tempering techniques and use the 5 elements to change the foundation of the bones. However, the 5 elements don't seem to be able to reach 7. I don't know about this. Bone honing Xiao Hua replied. I only know that only by tempering the 7 colors can I change my foundation and fellow Taoist can be sheltered in the light. As for what the last source is, it will depend on fellow Taoist luck. And I understand. Jade Archive, Xiao Hua closed his eyes and pondered. His figure instantly disappeared and reappeared in front of the damaged, immortal beheading stage. Looking at the rumbling thunder water, Jade Archive, Xiao Hua stretched out his hand, and a strand of thread-like thunder water fell from the gap of the immortal beheading stage. Then, Jade Archive, Xiao Hua flicked his finger, and one end of the thunder water disappeared in midair along with Jade Archive Xiao Hua's figure. It was as if Jade Archive Xiao Hua was holding the thunder water. Jade Archive Xiao Hua appeared in front of bone honing Xiao Hua, and the thunder water also entered the strange rune on bone honing Xiao Hua's forehead. Yes, it's this feeling. I like it. Bone honing Xiao Hua was overjoyed. He used the Big Dipper God fist again and guided the thunder water around his body. Jade Archive Xiao Hua was surprised. Fellow Taoist, didn't you say that the Big Dipper God fist was already ineffective? Why are you still using it? I'm used to it. Bone honing Xiao Hua said faintly. When Xiao Hua heard this, he was rather speechless. Most importantly, bone honing Xiao Hua said with a smile, whether it is the bone honing technique of the Sunset Island or the bone honing technique of the Demon Clan of Yellowflower Ridge, they are all boring. How can they be as impressive as the Big Dipper magical fist? Selling dog meat under false pretenses. Jade Archive Xiao Hua secretly despised the arrogant and narcissistic Xiao Hua's figure slowly disappeared. The Jade Pavilion was not a pavilion, but a mountain. It was a high peak that was extremely far away from the Black Cloud Ridge. This Jade Pavilion did not belong to any country. Because of the Jade Pavilion gathering that was held once every 10 years, all the Tao disciples on the hidden immortal continent knew about this place. This year was another decade. Many ambitious Taoism cultivators were flying towards the Jade Pavilion with their ambitions and the expectations of the Taoism kingdom. There were also some cultivators who wanted to obtain rare treasures and flew to the Jade Pavilion. This Yaotai gathering was similar to a dragon gate. The fish leaped over the dragon gate and turned into a dragon. It was very appropriate. Xian Songzi was a Taoism cultivator who had just successfully conceived a nascent soul. Currently, he was riding a snow eagle in midair with 2 boys. That snow eagle was extremely large. Its back was about 10 zhang in size. Xian Songzi's face carried an indescribable pride. He sat cross-legged behind a jade table. On the table, there was a jade pot, a jade cup, and a sparkling and translucent chessboard. Xian Songzi's white and slender fingers held a pitch-black chess piece. His eyes, however, were looking at the chessboard. On the chessboard, there were already black and white chess pieces mixed together. Xian Songzi raised his arm, and that black chess piece landed. His other hand shook, and a white chess piece appeared in his hand. Immediately after, Xian Songzi's hand that was holding the black chess piece just now reached out to the table. He picked up the jade cup and brought it to his mouth. The spiritual wine in the jade cup entered his mouth. Without waiting for Xian Songzi to put down the jade cup, a boy standing respectfully at the side of the table immediately raised the jade pot. After waiting for a moment, he saw that Xian Songzi didn't put down the jade cup. He hurriedly walked over and tilted the jade pot. The jade-green spiritual wine poured into the jade cup. After Xianzongzi drank 3 cups in a row, he placed the jade cup on the table. The boy tactfully filled the jade cup to the brim and placed the jade pot on the table. He returned to where he was standing earlier and stood there respectfully. The boy's eyes were filled with envy and admiration. Xianzongzi looked very satisfied. It was a feeling of being in high spirits. However, his heart was extremely bitter. If he had a choice, he definitely wouldn't have chosen to kneel before that Taoist cultivator who made him feel both gratitude and resentment 1,000 years ago. It was that sage-like Taoist cultivator who had performed a few spells in front of Xianzongzi's parents. He also gave Xianzongzi's parents some spiritual fruits and a considerable amount of gold and silver. Xianzongzi's parents immediately regarded him as a celestial being. They immediately allowed Xianzongzi to become a disciple of that cultivator. They also allowed that cultivator to bring Xianzongzi out of the remote and poor mountain village that Xianzongzi had long forgotten. Before that Taoist cultivator's lifespan was up, Xianzongzi had always felt that he was very fortunate to be able to walk on a path to heaven. He had a dozen so-called senior martial brothers beside him to take care of him. He also had ready-made cultivation methods and medicinal pills for his cultivation. In particular, Xianzongzi's aptitude was really excellent. He had only been a disciple of Taoism for 100 years, but his cultivation was already catching up to his senior martial brothers, who had been cultivating for hundreds of years. At that time, he was already a famous cultivator in a dozen countries. Unfortunately, those happy days were gone when that Taoist cultivator failed to cultivate to the nascent soul stage and reach the end of his lifespan. First, the spiritual herbs and other things provided by the country that Xianzongzi relied on began to decrease. Then, Xianzongzi's so-called senior martial brothers gradually fell in the battle with other Taoist cultivators and Confucian cultivators. Finally, the remaining 2 or 3 senior martial brothers also left that country and went to other places in the hidden immortal continent to look for opportunities for cultivation. Xianzongzi's so-called sect was thus disbanded. However, at this time, Xianzongzi already understood that this was the fate of all Taoist cultivators in the hidden immortal continent. No one could escape. If he wanted to cultivate, then he had to find vitality stones, spiritual herbs, cultivation methods, and so on. Of course, he could also choose not to cultivate. However, as a Taoist cultivator without roots in the hidden immortal continent, he was very likely to die in the hands of Confucian cultivators one day. Perhaps his life would be worse than that of a secular person. The Taoist sect was a road of no return. Of course, it was impossible for Xianzongzi not to cultivate. His aptitude was very high. According to that Taoist cultivator, he was the only disciple who could cultivate to the nascent soul stage and become the master of a country. In the following hundreds of years, Xianzongzi suffered a lot. Not to mention the exclusion and inexplicable pursuit of the Confucian cultivators. The Taoist cultivators forced Xianzongzi to the edge of death several times in order to snatch spiritual herbs, magic weapons, and other things. Countless times, Xianzongzi regretted that he didn't enter a Confucian cultivator's sect. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in this world. After regretting, Xianzongzi could only continue to cultivate. Fortunately, Xianzongzi, the leader of the hidden immortal continent's Taoist sects, finally became pregnant. However, after becoming pregnant, Xianzongzi immediately faced 2 choices. He could either become a rogue cultivator and cultivate with his own strength, or he could become the master of a country and use the power of the country to support his cultivation. Xianzongzi, who had suffered a lot, chose the latter almost without hesitation, just like most of the Taoist cultivators on the hidden immortal continent. Although the strength of a rogue cultivator's nascent soul stage was very strong, it was really dangerous in the hidden immortal continent, where there were many strong Confucian cultivators. Even if he took in a few more children, he might be hunted down and killed by the sanctimonious Confucian cultivators. Of course, This choice was not made by Xian Songzi on the spur of the moment. As early as when he cultivated to the late gold core stage, some monarchs who had no backing contacted him. Many monarchs also put forward excellent conditions. However, Xian Songzi was very ambitious. He knew that once he became the master of a country, his cultivation time would be reduced, and the possibility of him being able to cultivate to the nascent soul stage would be even smaller. Therefore, Xian Songzi declined all visits and concentrated on cultivation. With limited medicinal pills and other things, he finally stepped into the nascent soul stage. As soon as Xian Songzi became pregnant, he immediately attracted the attention of various countries. More than 10 monarchs came to visit him with generous gifts. Xian Songzi naturally welcomed them one by one. After discussing one by one, he chose a country with both potential and wise monarchs to be under his control in the future. Then, he waited for several years and made some preparations to participate in the Yaodai conference. In addition to these unknown difficulties in Xian Songzi's heart, at this time, Xian Songzi was a high-spirited person. As a Taoist cultivator of a nascent soul stage, it was almost certain that he would get the lot of the master of a country in the Yaodai conference. As long as he passed this last stage, Xian Songzi could cultivate steadily and gradually develop his own power, preparing for the out-of-body realm in the future. Of course, Xian Songzi also wanted to achieve the out-of-body realm. Otherwise, he would not have painstakingly made so many arrangements. Kill. Xian Songzi's voice seemed to come from his throat, but it also seemed to come from his heart. He stretched out his hand, and several rays of light appeared from his hand. Waves of impact surged in all directions like air waves. Immortal. The two boys were shocked. The impact instantly flipped them over, and their bodies floated up like fallen leaves. When they looked at Xian Songzi's hand again, the pitch-black chess piece also turned into nothingness at the same time. On the contrary, the chessboard on the table was under Xian Songzi's finger. The air waves dispersed calmly, and the chess pieces on the chessboard were not affected at all. Alas, Xian Songzi raised his hand and slightly flicked his finger. The air waves from more than 100 feet to the left immediately stagnated, and the two boys also stopped there. When Xian Songzi pulled his hand again, the two boys fell from the air and stood steadily on both sides of the table. Phew! After half a cup of tea's time, Xian Songzi poured himself a few cups of wine. Then, the two boys let out a long sigh and came to their senses with pale faces. They hurriedly knelt down and said, "Immortal, please forgive us. What have you done wrong?" Xian Songzi smiled and said, "It's all my fault. It has nothing to do with you. Get up." Chapter 3568. Yes, enlightened master. The boy on the left was more quick-witted. He hurriedly stood up and picked up the jade pot on the table. He obediently poured some spiritual wine and smiled. Our cultivation is still shallow, so we still need enlightened master to give us some pointers. If we can truly become your disciples, I'm sure we won't embarrass you in the future. Haha, don't worry. Xian Songzi smiled as he picked up the jade cup. Now that I've taken over the position of Grand Tutor, I can teach my disciples legitimately. Although you've only just entered the foundation establishment stage, it's not impossible for you to become a nascent soul cultivator like me. How would we dare to compare ourselves to enlightened master? The other boy hurriedly said, "We can ask for some immortal spells and help enlightened master do some things." Anything is fine. Xian Songzi nodded and was about to say something. Suddenly, he frowned and raised his eyebrows. He looked in front of him. In the blink of an eye, a 5-colored aura flashed across the horizon. At that moment, the sky had just begun to brighten, so this aura appeared a little abruptly. Xian Songzi's gaze swept around, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. Even when he used his divine will, he didn't find anything strange. However, just as Xian Songzi retracted his divine will, he suddenly felt a chill in his heart. Before Xian Songzi could channel his powers, there was a loud bang. The snow eagle, which was flying forward with its wings spread, suddenly tumbled. It was as if there was an invisible rope blocking the snow eagle's body. The snow eagle couldn't maintain its balance and lost control of its huge body. Xiansong-Zi was clearly caught off guard, but his expression didn't change. The moment his body was sent flying, the nascent soul in his dantian opened its eyes. It rubbed its small hands together, and a majestic aura was released from Xiansong-Zi's body. At the same time, Xiansong-Zi waved his hand again, and the table, chessboard, and other things fell into his hands. However, before Xiansong-Zi could put these items into his Chinquan bag, and before he could reach out to grab the two boys who had fallen from the eagle's back, rumble! Several thunderous booms descended from the sky, and a destructive aura rushed towards Xiansong-Zi. Vast pillar of qi. Xiansong-Zi was shocked, but when he felt the aura, he sneered. As a Taoist cultivator, he was more familiar with this murderous qi pillar than the Confucian cultivators. He relaxed and opened his mouth, and a small pagoda flew out. The small pagoda landed in the air, and thousands of jade talismans flashed. It let out a loud roar, and 1,000 feet of brilliance rushed out, sweeping away all the qi of heaven and earth nearby. It suddenly expanded to dozens of feet and rushed towards Xiansong-Zi's head. As for Xiansong-Zi, he kept the item in his hand into his universe bag. 2 beams of light from his other hand landed on the two boys. Boom, boom, boom. More than a dozen loud sounds were heard as the vast qi pillars that were comparable to thunderbolts struck the small pagoda. The small pagoda's brilliance flashed violently as it let out a mournful cry. The pagoda that had just expanded was immediately beaten back to its original size, tumbling in the air. Not good. Xiansong-Zi's expression changed greatly. He didn't expect the vast qi pillars to be so powerful. Moreover, the destructive aura only rushed out of the vast qi pillars at this moment, completely enveloping Xiansong-Zi. Xiansong-Zi knew that things weren't good. He didn't dare to care about the lives of the two boys. He hurriedly rubbed his hands together, and thousands of dark red threads of light rushed into the small pagoda along with the spell. The small pagoda trembled rapidly again, and circles of shadows rushed out. Every circle of shadows produced waves of qi that soared into the sky, trying to resist the destructive aura. Xiansong-Zi's dermic powers surged into the small pagoda at the right time. The second wave of the vast qi pillars rushed over like a tidal wave. Xiansong-Zi also shouted with great spirit, "Where did this shameless scoundrel come from? Kill, kill, kill." After he said the word kill 3 times, the small pagoda rose up in response. The jade talisman floated up, and the sky was filled with flying flowers. Boom! The rumbling sounds never stopped. Humph! Xiansong-Zi sneered. The vast qi pillar's aura was indeed very strong, so strong that it made his heart tremble. He couldn't help but want to release the pressure of a nascent soul to resist it. However, when he saw that his natal dermic treasure was able to resist the vast qi pillars, Xiansong-Zi began to look down on them. He was prepared to release a trace of his divine perception to check on the two boys. After all, the two boys might not have fallen too far in such a short time. Ga. However, just as Xiansong-Zi's divine perception was released, the snow eagle that was trying its best to stabilize itself in midair suddenly let out a wail. The wail was so ear-piercing that it split the sky. Xiansong-Zi was shocked again. He hurriedly looked over and saw several 5-colored rainbow bridges flying over from afar in front of the snow eagle. They arrived in front of him in a flash. Xiansong-Zi could already see clearly that the rainbow bridges weren't formed by a cultivator's escape technique. They were sword lights formed by the 5-colored qi pillars. Ambush! How could Xiansong-Zi not know that he was in big trouble? In his shock, he quickly retracted his divine perception and didn't dare to be distracted. He controlled his natal dermic treasure with one hand and slapped his forehead with the other. The hand of a nascent soul rushed out and grabbed at the rainbow bridges. Puff, puff, puff. Amidst the continuous rumbling sounds, Xian Zi's nascent soul hand was shattered by the five-colored sword pillars. The roaring waves of qi covered the sky and earth. Such a huge commotion also resounded through the nearby space. At the same time that Xian Zi's body trembled, a bloody light instantly shot into the sky. The huge snow eagle struggled slightly in the five-colored sword pillars, but it was immediately chopped into many pieces of meat. This is bad. Xian Zi naturally knew how powerful the snow eagle was, and he also knew the power of his nascent soul hand. However, it wasn't a match for the five-colored sword pillars at all. The incoming Confucian cultivator was at least at the mid-4th level of origin energy. Just as Xian Zi's fear rose, the pillar of qi blocked by the small pagoda in the sky changed again. Boom, boom. The pillar of qi roared, and the pressure on the small pagoda suddenly increased by several times. The light on the small pagoda was instantly extinguished and it fell from the sky. The aura that Xian Zi had just snorted at now revealed its hidden fangs. It broke through Xian Zi's pressure and crashed down on Xian Zi's body. Xian Zi's face was ashen. Without any hesitation, a ray of light shot out from the top of his head, and a nascent soul less than a foot long rushed out. It was the nascent soul that Xian Zi had just nurtured and hadn't condensed yet. The moment the nascent soul appeared, it immediately waved its small hand, and a ray of light flashed like a silk thread. The small pagoda once again shone brightly. Not only did it protect the nascent soul, but it also appeared from the void and covered Xian Zi's body, whose eyes were already closed. Unfortunately, Xian Zi had underestimated the strength of his attacker. Without waiting for Xian Zi's nascent soul to activate the small pagoda, a five-colored sword ray appeared out of nowhere. It seemed to directly cut through the heavy pagoda, but it also seemed to pierce through the void and land on Xian Zi's body. There were only a few pu sounds, and the light on Xian Zi's body flashed a few times. The protective treasure armor was pierced through, and Xian Zi's body turned into minced meat in the blink of an eye. Xian Zi's nascent soul let out a sharp cry. Its eyes were filled with anger. Even now, he still hadn't seen the attacker's true appearance, and his body had already been destroyed. Xian Zi made a prompt decision. His nascent soul glowed with a faint divine light. He raised his hands and grabbed the small pagoda. His entire nascent soul immediately disappeared in midair. Xian Zi wanted to use teleportation to escape this place and escape the clutches of the ambushers. Boom, boom, boom. More than a dozen pillars of boundless qi appeared around 1,000 feet away, completely sealing off the surrounding area. A cold voice resounded, "Suppress." Along with the voice, the pillars of righteous qi became solid, and the righteous qi condensed into a ball. There was a flash of light somewhere, and Xian Zi's nascent soul appeared with a panicked expression. He quickly looked around and saw a scholarly general in golden battle armor appear. His face was filled with confusion because he didn't recognize this scholarly general at all. "Who are you?" Xian Zi's voice was very sharp and filled with anger. "Oomph." The scholarly general didn't care at all. He opened his mouth, and a mouthful of righteous qi flew into the air. A disc fell from the sky. The pillar of righteous qi and the terrifying aura that could destroy the world came from a disc. At this moment, the scholarly general was clearly going to kill Xian Zi's nascent soul. Damn it! Xian Zi knew that he had encountered a scholarly cultivator who had an inexplicable hatred for Dao cultivators. This scholarly cultivator never needed a reason to attack Dao cultivators. He cursed and formed a seal with his hands. Light flashed around his body. It was clear that he was going to explode his nascent soul to take this scholarly cultivator down with him. Just at this moment, another five-colored sword energy flashed. This sword energy completely controlled the space around Xian Zi's nascent soul. Before Xian Zi could form a seal, all of the origin energy disappeared. Xiansong Zi's nascent soul seemed to be suppressed and couldn't move at all. The eyes of Xiansong Zi's nascent soul were about to drip blood. He had cultivated for 1,000 years and was about to show his talent on the hidden immortal continent, but he was actually ambushed here. The strength of this ambusher was too terrifying. It had only been the time to drink a cup of tea, but his body was destroyed and his nascent soul was about to die. All of his blood, sweat, and tears were about to turn into water. He was really unwilling to accept this. Just as the five-colored sword energy was about to fall and Xiansong Zi's nascent soul was about to be torn apart, the sword energy suddenly turned into thousands of strands of five-colored energy that wrapped around Xiansong Zi's nascent soul like silk. At the same time, the disc fell and sucked Xiansong Zi's nascent soul into it. The disc fell and turned into the size of a palm. It flew into the sky and landed in the hands of the scholarly general in golden armor. The scholarly general looked at the disc and reached out. 5 strands of energy came out from his 5 fingers and entered the disc. He then raised his hand, and Xiansong Zi's nascent soul came out from a disc. Congratulations, Brother Wang. A tall Confucian scholar flew over on a colorful cloud. The Confucian scholar's cheekbones were prominent, and his eyes were long and slender. In his hand was a treasured sword that was about a foot long. This treasured sword reflected the rising sun and transformed into a rainbow. Chapter 35:69. Same to you. The golden-armored Confucian nodded slightly and narrowed his eyes. He looked at the nascent soul on the round plate that had its eyelids closed and was motionless. He said, "This is already the 3rd one. Brother Wang is indeed my unparalleled strategist. I have destroyed 2 Taoist countries and spent a lot of effort to search for Taoist nascent soul stage cultivators in the hidden immortal continent. In 2 years, I only captured 14 nascent soul stage cultivators, which is far from the number of immortal emissaries. I didn't expect to capture 3 nascent soul stage cultivators in a dozen days at the Jade Pavilion. Haha, this is all thanks to Brother Wang's good fortune." The Confucian scholar waved his hand and laughed. If Brother Wang hadn't been conferred the title of Marquis, how could I have learned about the Jade Pavilion meeting from that Taoist cultivator? Moreover, it is said that in this Jade Pavilion meeting, most of the Taoist cultivators are so-called gold core cultivators. There aren't many nascent soul cultivators who can participate. Isn't it a sign of Brother Wang's great fortune? As long as Brother Wang completes the mission of the immortal envoys, you will certainly be favored by the immortal palace. Not to mention establishing an empire that will last for eternity. You can even expect to be ranked among the immortals. Don't worry. You and I have been side by side since we were children. With me, there will be no shortage of Brother Wang." The golden-armored Confucian laughed. "After I obliterate this nascent soul, we will look for the 4th nascent soul." With that, a dragon pattern appeared between the golden-armored Confucian's eyebrows. He bit his middle finger and a drop of blood oozed out. He touched the dragon pattern with his hand, and a wisp of blood-red dragon chi rushed into the air. The Confucian scholar's index finger moved in the air, and the dragon chi followed the movement of his index finger. Inscriptions that resembled the roaring of small dragons appeared above the nascent souls. However, before these inscriptions were finished, the Confucian scholar frowned, and his eyes flashed with 5-colored brilliance. He turned his head and reminded, "Brother Wang, I'm afraid there isn't enough time. It seems that there are Taoist cultivators coming from that side." "Oh!" Delight appeared on the golden-armored Confucian general's face. He opened his mouth, and the inscriptions that had already been written, as well as the remaining dragon chi, were immediately sucked into his mouth. He raised his hand, and the clouds above the round plate surged, suppressing Xiansong Zi's nascent soul into the imperial artifact. He raised his eyebrows and smiled. These Taoist cultivators are like carps crossing the river, all for the sake of the imperial master's lot. Even outsiders can't escape the temptation of fame and fortune. Brother Wang, please conceal yourself. I'll go and take a look. The Confucian scholar's eyes were abnormally bright. Wait for my signal. Brother Wang, we'll attack together. Thousands of air currents surged around the golden-armored Confucian as he rushed into the sky. The disk also flew up, and the clouds turned into layers of white clouds, which were the same as the ones in the sky, covering the golden-armored Confucian for hundreds of feet around him. The Confucian scholar waved the five-colored sword in his hand, and the sword turned into a rainbow. The Confucian scholar's figure also fell into it, and he became one with the sword as he rushed into the distance. In less than half a meal's worth of time, in the distant horizon, flames flashed into the sky, followed by a burst of music. More than a dozen boys with music in their hands stood on 3 or 5 huge fire vultures and flew over. The fire vultures were several feet in size, and as they flapped their fiery red wings, wisps of flames rushed into the air. Caw! Occasionally, the fire vultures would open their mouths and let out a clear cry, and several fierce flames would spurt out from their mouths and noses. The boys all wore fiery red Taoist robes, and the cuffs of their Taoist robes were decorated with flame patterns. Behind a fire vulture were several flaming carpets. On each of the carpets stood a cultivator in the same Taoist robes. These cultivators were slightly older, and each of them stood with a focused expression. Their eyes shone brightly, and each of them carried a large gourd on their backs. Behind the cultivators was a fiery red war chariot pulled by a fire dragon. Needless to say, the fire dragon was only dozens of feet long, and its body was surrounded by flames. Wisps of flames seemed to dance rhythmically in the air. Just the fiery red war chariot alone exuded a majestic aura. Anyone who looked at the war chariot would be filled with a kind of blazing heat. This kind of unforgettable aura caused the floating clouds in the air to ripple in all directions. Not to mention, the flames on the war chariot were red and black, and the black flames even distorted the void as the war chariot passed by. Looking at the war chariot, a cultivator who looked like a child sat calmly on it. His Taoist robes flashed with golden light, and a pitch-black flame pattern flickered between his eyebrows. This cultivator looked extremely inconspicuous on the war chariot, but the flames and the terrifying aura of the war chariot seemed to move with the cultivator's breathing. Oh! Suddenly, this cultivator's mouth and nose let out a low hum. The entire war chariot's flames greatly flourished, and that majestic aura even rushed into the air. Stop! A middle-aged man closest to this cultivator hastily spoke. Immediately, the music-playing boy stopped. Ancestor, that middle-aged man hastily turned his head and asked in a low voice, "Do you have any orders?" That child did not pay attention to this middle-aged man. His eyes slightly opened, and 2 faint flames flashed from his pitch-black pupils. The child raised his head and swept a glance, indifferently saying, "Your distinguished self has dragon chi. I fear you're the master of country. Hiding here today, are you looking for a suitable national teacher?" It was a pity that after a long while, no one spoke. That child was not angry, and he still said with an indifferent tone, "This old man is the Li Fire Nation's Taoist, Master Huada. I received Star Lord Hall's Kong Hongwu's invitation to go to the Jade Pavilion. If your distinguished self has the heart to find a talent that can assist your distinguished self in stabilizing the country, you can wait until after the Jade Pavilion's meeting to pay a visit to each Star General." However, speaking to here, Taoist Huada's voice suddenly became cold. However, this old man sees that your Confucian cultivation has already reached the upper 4th level of origin energy. You can use a dragon weapon to fight against someone with the 5th level of origin energy. I fear you don't need my Tao Sex national teacher, right? Let this old man give you a piece of advice. Don't have any dirty thoughts in your heart. My Tao Sex cultivators are all celestial monarchs in the eyes of the immortal palaces. They're not people that an emperor of a continent like you can understand. as a Dao sex cultivator. Although I can't rashly kill you, if you don't listen to this old man and insist on doing things your own way, sooner or later, you will fall at the hands of my Dao sex disciples. After a while, Taoist Huada waved his hand and ordered, "Let's go." When the middle-aged cultivator heard this, he hastily waved his hand. The dozens of children in front of him began to play again. The fire dragon roared, and the war chariot began to move again. Behind the war chariot, there were dozens of young and beautiful women dressed in palace attire. They held various magic tools in their hands, and their jade pendants and other items were jingling. Just as Taoist Huada's war chariot flew over 100 meters, a huge dragon-like flame suddenly appeared in the sky and pounced toward a large cloud. Boom! With a loud bang, the clouds did not dissipate like ordinary clouds. Instead, they flashed with golden light. Although the golden light quickly melted into liquid gold in the flames, the clouds did not dissipate. After the time it took to eat a meal, Taoist Huada's trump card disappeared, and the fire dragon also gradually disappeared. The cloud violently tumbled, and the golden-armored Confucian stepped out of the cloud with an angry expression. At this moment, the disc in his hand was still covered in a layer of faint flame. Brother Wong. In the distance, a 5-colored rainbow appeared out of thin air, and the Confucian scholar appeared again. There was a kind of fear on his face, and he whispered, "I was also warned by Taoist Huada and didn't dare to rashly send out a message. It's only an upper 4th grade essence force." The golden-armored Confucian narrowed his eyes, and the dragon chi between his eyebrows faintly roared. "If I go all out with Brother Wong's help, I have a 60% chance of killing him." The Confucian scholar frowned and shook his head slightly. "Brother Wong, you underestimate this cultivator too much. He can easily detect our concealment technique, which shows that Dao Sec's divine sense is powerful. Any cultivator with outstanding divine sense generally has a secret technique that others can't reach. We can't let the so-called Star Lord Hall know that we are here to kill nascent soul cultivators. Moreover, Taoist Huada is invited to the Jade Pavilion meeting. If something happens to him, the entire Dao sect of the hidden immortal continent won't agree. This Star-Lord Hall, what is it?" The golden-armored Confucian didn't comment and asked curiously, "Is this Kong Hongwu that Taoist would have mentioned? How come I don't know anything about him?" These are all tricks that the Immortal Palace uses to fool Dao sect, right? The Confucian scholar smiled. Not only Brother Wong doesn't know, but even those Dao sect cultivators who haven't participated in the Jade Pavilion meeting may not know. Forget it. The golden-armored Confucian waved his hand. It's enough to get 3 nascent soul cultivators this time. Now that the Jade Pavilion meeting is close, don't let other Dao sect cultivators notice anything strange. Yes, I will listen to Brother Wong's orders. The Confucian scholar was very respectful and answered with his head lowered. The golden-armored Confucian waved his hand, and the disc fell and turned into a dragon-shaped cloud. The Confucian general flew and landed on the cloud, ordering, "Brother Wong, come up and return to the country with me." "I don't dare." Seeing the dragon-shaped cloud, the Confucian scholar immediately felt fear and said respectfully, "This mountain river seal is the heirloom seal of the capital Qin state. It has always been controlled by the monarch. I don't dare to get close to it." "I pardon you," the golden-armored Confucian said with a smile. The Confucian scholar still didn't dare and bowed. "Even if Brother Wong agrees, I don't dare to ride on the Jade Seal. I ask Brother Wong to control the Jade Seal, and I will open the way for Brother Wong." "Alas, okay." The golden-armored Confucian shook his head slightly. "Now you're going to become the monarch of a country, but you're still so reserved in front of me." "Brother Wong, don't worry. Although I can be called monarch, my monarch and subject status with Brother Wong has already been established when we were brothers. It won't change in this life." The Confucian scholar smiled and turned into a sword again, rushing into the distance like a nascent soul cultivator. When the Confucian scholar left, the golden-armored Confucian general smiled. The dragon-shaped cloud under his feet flashed with golden light, and he also chased after him like a meteor. In just over an hour, the two had already flown more than thousands of miles. Seeing the mountains spread out under them and the sunlight shining down from above, the golden-armored Confucian general pointed with his finger and said with a smile, "If I were born with a cliff, I would expand the territory of the empire to this place. I am willing to rule the hidden immortal forever, and the people of the hidden immortal are all my children." Chapter 3570. Brother Wong's spirit is rare in the world. Even immortal emissaries have to be convinced. Brother Wong's great wish will definitely be realized. It wasn't clear whether the scholar in the distance was flattering or sincere, but his voice was very respectful. At this moment, a pure and holy white brilliance appeared in the distance, like a full moon falling from night to day. It immediately attracted the golden-armored Confucian general's gaze. His eyes flickered with a faint golden light, and his pupils were blooming with the shape of a flower. Light feather heavenly horse? The golden-armored Confucian general cried out in surprise, but there was also joy in his tone. When the golden light in his eyes gradually faded, the dragon-shaped cloud under his feet immediately changed direction and rushed towards the heavenly horse. The golden-armored Confucian general shouted, "Brother Wong, wait a moment. This Taoist cultivator doesn't seem to be going to the Jade Pavilion gathering. When I kill this Taoist cultivator, I'll use the heavenly horse as a congratulatory gift for you becoming king." Brother Wong. The scholar raised his eyebrows, and his eyes flashed with an indescribable expression. Although his words were still respectful, there was a hint of intimacy in the way he addressed him. When he turned around the five-colored sword light and followed the Confucian general to the heavenly horse, a five-colored divine light slowly appeared in his eyes. However, when he saw the cultivator who was coldly facing the mountain river seal that his royal brother had taken out, his expression changed drastically. He hurriedly cried out, "Yin Ming, be careful. This person's cultivation is definitely not on the surface." However, before the scholar finished speaking, his brother Wong had already made his move. The scholar didn't dare to be negligent. He urged his five-colored true chi and flew into the distance a bit faster than a rainbow. Although it was a bit slower than when he ambushed Xian Songzi, the momentum of a joint attack had already been formed. This scholar's eye-clearing technique was far superior to his brother Wong's. Unfortunately, he still didn't truly see how powerful this Taoist cultivator was. Before he could fly closer, everything that happened in front of him left him dumbfounded. The cultivator riding the heavenly horse was naturally Xiaohua. However, Xiaohua's direction was a bit wrong again. He passed by the side of the Jade Pavilion and collided with the two scholars. When the scholar looked at Xiaohua, Xiaohua had already sensed it. Xiaohua was originally happy that he could finally ask someone for directions. However, before he could release his divine sense, the golden-armored Confucian general had already flown towards him on a dragon-shaped cloud with a proud look on his face. Xiaohua frowned and clapped his hands. The soaring dragon, shears glittering with golden light, appeared in his hands. He coldly looked at the Confucian general who was roaring arrogantly. Sure enough, when he was still several dozen feet away from Xiaohua, the Confucian general's zhenqi surged, and the auspicious cloud under his feet transformed into a circular plate several dozen feet in size. Hundreds of pillars of zhenqi rushed out from the circular plate, and in the void around 1,000 feet around the circular plate, even more zhenqi surged out, majestically smashing toward Xiaohua, as if wanting to smash Xiaohua into meat paste. Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and looked at the Confucian general with a sinister smile and ecstasy on his face. He then slightly raised his eyes to look at the Confucian scholar who used the clear eyes technique in the distance. The aura on the circular plate was indeed powerful. In Xian Songzi's eyes, it was enough to destroy the heavens and earth. However, in Xiaohua's eyes, after seeing the five brocade, cloud painting's aura that could exterminate all living things, this kind of aura was somewhat insufficient. Seeing that the pillar of Zhenqi mercilessly descending and really wanting to kill him as soon as they met, Xiaohua's previous thoughts of asking for the reason had already been strangled by Xiaohua. "Oomph!" Xiaohua sneered, and the space several dozen feet around him suddenly became cold. He then clapped his hands, and golden light surged out from the top of his head. A nascent soul hand that was several hundred feet in size soared into the sky and grabbed towards the circular plate. Once the nascent soul hand appeared, the space within 1,000 feet seemed to solidify, and even the pillar of Zhenqi was controlled. At this moment, the Confucian scholar cried out in alarm. The Confucian general, named Yin Ming, was greatly shocked, but this shock only lasted for a moment. Soon after, the Confucian general laughed loudly. "Xian Liang, come over here. This is another nascent soul cultivator, and his cultivation is close to the upper 4th level of origin energy. Capture him." Unfortunately, before he could finish his words, his expression changed drastically again, because Xiao Hua's nascent soul hand was coming from afar. A suffocating feeling was born in his heart. The Zhenqi in his body, like the Zhenqi in the air, was in a state of stagnation. "Damn it!" the Confucian general cursed. He opened his mouth, and a blood-red Zhenqi fell on the circular plate. A bloody mist appeared on the circular plate, and the entire circular plate suddenly expanded. Within the bloody mist, countless images of mountains and rivers appeared. The Zhenqi had a dignified aura. It was several times heavier than before, and in an instant, the nascent soul hand became dim. "It's just a small trick," Xiao Hua sneered, and his divine sense suddenly activated. During this time, Xiao Hua's divine sense had been tempered by Do Shan Jun's divine sense secret technique, and had become a lot stronger. With this activation, the magic power in his body was truly matched with his secret technique and majestically rushed into the nascent soul hand. Xiao Hua's divine sense moved at will, and the nascent soul hand emitted a bright golden light. It crossed the sky and grabbed the entire circular plate along with the pillar of Zhenqi. Rumble! A series of rumbling sounds came from the nascent soul hand. The entire nascent soul hand continuously shook, but there was no sign of it collapsing. "Suppress! Suppress! Suppress!" The Confucian scholar's face was somewhat pale. He hurriedly bit his finger and pressed it on the dragon mark between his eyebrows, and shouted 3 times in a row. Roar! From the dragon mark, a blood-red crystal thread rushed out. This crystal thread was in the shape of a dragon and elephant. It landed on the circular plate, and the entire circular plate instantly turned into an oval-shaped jade seal. A terrifying Zhenqi that could make immortals and mortals retreat rushed out from the jade seal, and in an instant, Xiao Hua's nascent soul hand was pushed away. Boring! Xiao Hua's reaction was definitely unforgettable for the Confucian scholar named Xian Yanming. Xiao Hua helplessly shook his head and berated his unique imperial dragon technique. Boring! Xian Yanming sneered. How could a Taoist cultivator know the power of a Confucian cultivator's Zhenqi? Unfortunately, just as these sarcastic words came out from the bottom of his heart, he saw Xiao Hua's Zhenqi flourish. Roar! A Zhenqi that was countless times stronger than the mountain and river seal rushed out. This Zhenqi unexpectedly turned into the shadow of a huge dragon. It opened its mouth in the air, and the mountain and river seal fell into the huge dragon's mouth like a small stone. Not only that, after the mountain and river seal fell into the huge dragon's mouth, a powerful suction force soared into the sky like maggots. It really fell on the dragon mark between Xian Yanming's eyebrows. Before Xian Yanming could do anything, his body became light, as if a cold wind blew through his heart. The dragon mark between his eyebrows turned into a golden python and fell into the huge dragon's mouth. Xian Yanming was stunned. Although this was the first time he encountered it, and he had never heard of it before, He clearly knew in his heart that the Jun Qi in his body, which was the fate of the capital Qin state, had been robbed. It was taken away by this unremarkable Taoist cultivator in front of him. How is this possible? Xian Yinming almost roared in his heart, but the development of the situation had long been out of his control. In the moment when he was absent-minded, he saw Xiao Hua open his hand, and a golden light flashed in the air. Although Xian Yinming's golden armor flashed with countless inscriptions, layers of Jin Qi were generated from the void, layer by layer, and layer by layer. They condensed, wanting to block the sword light. However, under the swing of the golden dragon's tail, all the inscriptions were cut in half, and all the Jin Qi was cut off from Xian Yinming's neck as easily as tofu. Xian Yinming's eyes were rounder than usual. Perhaps only at this time did he remember what Huda Junren said before. Pooh! Xian Yinming's neck spurted out several feet of blood, and the same green Jun Qi rushed out from the blood, with a panicked face, and fell towards the five-colored rainbow in the distance. Xiao Hua coldly snorted, and the tongue Jiao Shi's slightly trembled. A golden light streaked across the sky, and the whole Jin Qi was cut in half. As the tongue Jiao Shi's golden light shone brightly, the Jin Qi was also absorbed by the tongue Jiao Shi's. Go! Xiao Hua pointed his finger again, and the tongue Jiao Shi's did not stop in the air and cut towards the approaching five-colored rainbow. Xian Yinliang's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. In the blink of an eye, in the time it took for him to urge his Jun Qi to catch up, Brother Wang, who was at the upper fourth level of Jin Qi, had already fallen. Not to mention that the capital Qin state's national weapon had fallen into the hands of this Taoist sect cultivator. Even the Emperor's imperial dragon technique was a piece of cake in front of this Taoist sect cultivator's Jin Qi. In particular, the golden light that pierced through the sky flashed with a cold light and sharpness that was not the slightest bit inferior to the Jun Qi sword in his hand. Although Xian Yinliang's heart was filled with hatred, he did not lose his reason. The moment he urged his Jun Qi to cut towards the tongue Jiao Shi's, his entire body flashed, and he prepared to escape in another direction. With a crisp sound, the five-colored rainbow shook violently, and several cracks appeared. Xian Yinliang's face immediately paled. Xian Yinliang did not dare to hesitate any longer, and the Jun Qi in his body gushed out like it was free. He hurriedly rushed into the distance, and he did not even have the courage to look back. He was afraid that if he looked back, his speed of escape would decrease, and that golden light would fall on his body. The escape of a cultivator at the upper fourth level of Jin Qi was comparable to the strength of a late Yuanying stage cultivator. Although Xian Yinliang's escape was not comparable to the teleportation of a Yuanying stage cultivator, the difference was not too great. If it was someone else, they might not be able to catch up. Unfortunately, this kind of speed paled in comparison to Xiao Hua's lightning escape. However, although Xiao Hua liked to eliminate evil, he was merciful towards enemies who did not act ruthlessly against him. Looking at the five-colored Jin Qi from afar, Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the tongue Jiao Shi's fell into his hand. There was not the slightest bit of damage on the sharp blade. Damn it, I really didn't expect this. This Doshan Jun's divine sense technique is really powerful. Xiao Hua sighed with emotion. Not to mention this Zhao's Yuanying stagehand is extremely powerful. The speed and power of this tongue Jiao Shi's have also increased by a lot. With this kind of divine sense, this Xiao can easily use all of the Yuanying stage techniques. Chapter 3571. However, after putting away the soaring dragon shears, Xiao Hua scratched his head and said in distress, I just wanted to ask for directions. How did I get involved in another life? I really don't know what this Confucian cultivator is thinking. He seems to have the luck of an emperor. Why is he coveting my heavenly horse? Immediately after, Xiao Hua's figure descended and used the Samadhi true fire to set Xian Yinming's corpse on fire. He also took the golden armor, Chinquan bag, and other items. After looking through them, he sneered. This guy is actually the king of Su province's capital Qin state. He didn't want to be the king of a good country and came to find trouble with me for no reason. Looking at the memorials and other items in the Chinquan bag, he could be considered a diligent king. Why is he even more blind than the king of Bronze Pillar State? Thinking about it, Xiao Hua prepared to burn all these items, but after a slight hesitation, he put them away. These items were just waste paper to Xiao Hua. They couldn't be compared to the large amount of vitality stones in the Chinquan bag, but who knows if these things will be useful in the future. Just as Xiao Hua landed on the flying carriage and was about to find someone to ask for directions, a deep voice sounded in Xiao Hua's mind. Fellow Taoist, I am Dragon Vein Xiao Hua. Can you come in for a chat? Oh, Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. The disc was taken away by Dragon Vein Xiao Hua. It must be similar to the 5-dragon Imperial Jade Seal. Xiao Hua couldn't use it himself, so he didn't care. Who knew that Dragon Vein Xiao Hua would call him? That thing must be strange. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. His mind immediately returned to his body. Fellow Taoist, please. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua held the oval-shaped mountain river seal in his hand and smiled at Jade Archive Xiao Hua. Jade Archive Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent and returned the greeting. I am polite. Thank you for your trouble. No need to be polite. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua was majestic and graceful. His voice was equally dignified. This is just a small matter for I. Moreover, I could devour dragon chi. Why wouldn't I do it? Hee, I don't know why fellow Taoist called me. Is there a problem with this item? Jade Archive Xiao Hua asked with a smile. There's nothing special about this item. It's just an ordinary item used to suppress fate, similar to the 5-dragon Imperial Jade Seal from before. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua replied. It's just that this item is somewhat different from the 5-dragon Imperial Jade Seal. There are actually a few interesting things suppressed inside. Something interesting? Jade Archive Xiao Hua was deep in thought. He looked at the disc in Dragon Vein Xiao Hua's hand. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua opened his mouth, and a mouthful of yellow qi landed on the disc. The image of mountains and rivers gushed out from the disc, and then 3 nascent souls were sent out along with the dragon qi. Oh, interesting indeed. Xiao Hua looked at the 2 nascent souls who were in a daze. One of the nascent souls had its eyes tightly closed and was surrounded by 5-colored threads of qi. He couldn't help but nod his head. That's not interesting. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua smiled faintly and opened his mouth again. After the yellow gas fell, an item rushed out from the mountain river seal. A pure white cloud flew out from the mountain and river seal, and an uncontrollable aura rushed out from the cloud. Even in Xiao Hua's body, strands of noble spirit seeped out from the void and wrapped around the cloud. In just a moment, the cloud was formed, and the aura was about to soar into the sky. What is this? Jade Archive Xiao Hua was stunned. He grabbed with his hand, and the cloud that soared into the sky fell into Jade Archive Xiao Hua's hand and turned into a thin layer of almost invisible cloud. The strangest thing was that the cloud was extremely repulsive to Jade Archive Xiao Hua. The edges of the cloud were like tentacles, trying to avoid Jade Archive Xiao Hua's aura. Moreover, the uncontrollable aura from before was brewing inside the cloud, as if it would explode as long as it found an opportunity. Dragon Vein Xiao Hua smiled and said, "This must be something for Confucian cultivators. As for what it is specifically used for, I don't know." Where's Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua? Jade Archive Xiao Hua asked. Shua. The 5-colored cloud moved, and the scholarly dressed Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua appeared in front of Jade Archive Xiao Hua. He cupped his hands and said, "What business does fellow immortal have with me?" At this time, Jade Archive Xiao Hua was used to Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's name. He stretched out his hand and asked, "Does fellow immortal recognize this thing?" "I don't recognize it." Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua answered very cleanly. After answering, he didn't forget to add, "Fellow immortal recognizes it. I recognize it. If fellow immortal doesn't recognize it, I also don't recognize it." Jade Archive Xiao Hua rolled his eyes at Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua and said in a strange tone, "Fellow immortal has only studied for a few years. Why do your words sound so sour?" What made Jade Archive Xiao Hua's eyes pop out was that Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua actually shook his head and said, "If you know it, then you know it. If you don't know it, then you don't know it. Haha, I still have clothes to dry at home. I'll take my leave first." Dragon Vein Xiao Hua laughed and disappeared with a flash of golden light. The mountain river seal, however, remained in place. "Fellow immortal, help I take a look at what this thing is." Jade Archive Xiao Hua waved his hand and threw the cloud into Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's hand without waiting for him to drop his book bag. Scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua took the strands of cloud, but before he could do anything, a loud boom resounded. The strands of cloud began to expand as if they were filled with air. Soon after, strings of jade flew out from the expanding cloud along with heavenly music. Then, layers upon layers of palaces appeared from the cloud. Xiao Hua glanced at the Jade Archive and saw that there was an immortal jade palace hidden inside the cloud. Immortal palace? Jade Archive Xiao Hua frowned because he was very familiar with the image of the immortal palace inside the cloud. It was the immortal palace that Chongyun Sex, Mo Jinli, and the others showed on the stage during the longevity-suppressing immortal ceremony. This is the immortal palace decree. Jade Archive Xiao Hua didn't hear anything, but Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's eyes flashed with 5 colors, as if there was something Confucian cultivators could see inside the cloud. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua said indifferently, "It's for the king of Qin State, Xian Yanming, but there's nothing written inside. I don't know what use it has." Jade Archive Xiao Hua frowned even more. Looking at the immortal palace decree in Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's hand, he asked curiously, "Why did the immortal palace give the immortal palace decree to the king of hidden immortal continent? Moreover, according to common sense, any decree should be written on the immortal palace decree, right?" "That's true, but maybe the immortal palace has some secret that they don't want others to know, so they didn't write anything." Confucian cultivator Xiao Huan nodded. "Unfortunately, Xian Yiming's corpse is long gone, and I'm afraid his soul is also gone. Otherwise, fellow immortal could ask." "Forget it. Who cares?" Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's matter has nothing to do with I. Jade Archive Xiao Hua waved his hand and asked, "Is it better to leave this immortal palace decree with fellow immortal, or in the mountain river seal?" "Naturally, it's better to leave it with me. This immortal palace decree is the same as Mahavairocana's Buddhist edict. The essence of Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's cultivation can be traced. It's very useful for my cultivation. Leaving it with fellow immortal Dragon Vein is like casting pearls before swine." Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua smiled, and his eyes curved. Only now could it be seen that this Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua was definitely Xiao Hua's primordial spirit. Even if he read Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's poems and books, he still couldn't change his greedy nature. After Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua finished speaking, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of true qi. The entire immortal palace decree turned into a pure white feather robe that fell on Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's body. Waves of clouds appeared out of thin air, and Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua really looked like an immortal. "Goodbye." Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua was very polite. He cupped his hands and said, "In the future, if there is such a good thing, don't hesitate to call me over. I'm willing to serve fellow immortal. I won't see you off." Jade Archive Xiao Hua's eyes seemed to have seen Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua's foxtail. He waved his hand, and his gaze fell on the 3 nascent souls. After thinking for a moment, Xiao Hua made a grabbing motion with his hand, and the 3 nascent souls fell into his hand. Then, his entire figure disappeared. In a flash, Jade Archive Xiao Hua's figure appeared in the space. However, before he could stand still, he He saw layers of bubbles appear on the skin of the three nascent souls in his hand. The bubbles rapidly expanded and kept bursting. The skin of the three nascent souls collapsed into space. Oh, not good. Jade Archive Xiao Hua was shocked. He didn't dare to be negligent. He covered his robe, and his figure swayed. He quickly rushed out of the space with the three nascent souls. When the three nascent souls came out of the space, the bubbles on the skin immediately disappeared. The previous collapse also disappeared. This, Jade Archive, Xiao Hua pondered for a moment and immediately understood. Damn it, I understand. The nascent souls of Taoist cultivators are the condensation of the world's spiritual energy. In the end, it is the Tao Foundation and the world's spiritual energy. In I's space, the world's spiritual energy is different from the outside world. The primordial spirit and the physical body can enter, but the nascent souls can't. Good. Fortunately, I's nascent soul has just been born and hasn't entered the space. Otherwise, it would be a big loss. What does fellow Taoists think? Jade Archive, Xiao Hua, suddenly thought of something and asked. Green-robed Xiao Hua's figure appeared next to Jade Archive Xiao Hua. He looked at the three nascent souls with some disdain and shook his head slightly. Fellow Taoist, although these two nascent souls are in the middle stage of the nascent soul stage, it seems that the difference between them and my nascent souls is not small. You have a good idea. Everyone can use the body of this nascent soul, but I don't think it's good. Others may not like it. Wait for I to see. Jade Archive, Xiao Hua raised his head and thought for a moment. He stretched out his hand, and a thin crystal thread appeared between his index finger. It split into three and fell between the eyebrows of the three nascent souls. A moment later, Jade Archive Xiao Hua shook his hand, and the crystal thread disappeared. He said, "As I thought, the primordial spirits of these two nascent souls have already been obliterated. They're just empty shells. If fellow Taoists are interested, you can all enter." As he said this, he looked at green-robed Xiao Hua with a smile and said, "Could it be that fellow Taoist is not interested? Am I? How could I not be interested?" Green-robed Xiao Hua replied in an embarrassed tone. When green-robed Xiao Hua entered one of the nascent souls, the nascent soul opened its eyes. It was very lively, and the nascent soul's body expanded a bit. However, the nascent soul waved its hands and looked at itself. It then lowered its head and closed its eyes. Chapter 3572. Xian Zi bitterly smiled and landed on the flying carriage. He sat down cross-legged and asked in a low voice, "I wonder where Taoist Xiao is going? And where did you meet the king of the Qin state, Xian Yanming?" When Xiao Hua said that he came to participate in the Jade Pavilion meeting and met Xian Yanming, Xian Zi sighed and said with emotion, "Alas, it's all because of fate. If I met you half a day earlier, I'm afraid I wouldn't have encountered such a disaster." "Oh, what do you mean?" Xiao Hua understood. "You're also going to the Jade Pavilion meeting? You just met Xian Yanming half a day ago?" "Of course." Xian Songzi nodded. "Moreover, if I guess correctly, Xian Yanming and another Confucian cultivator were lying in ambush on the way to the Jade Pavilion meeting." "Damn it!" Xiao Hua's eyes flashed with ruthlessness. He knew that the other two nascent soul cultivators must have the same goal as him. But then, Xiao Hua was puzzled again. He looked at Xian Songzi and said in a low voice, "But the problem is Xian Yanming is a Confucian cultivator. Why does he want the nascent soul of a Taoist cultivator? This is not something I can know." Xian Songzi clenched his teeth and said, "Doesn't Xian Yanming have an accomplice? He must also be from the capital Qin state. When we find that person, we'll know." "Yes, there will be a chance in the future." Xiao Hua nodded and looked around, "But right now it's better for me to participate in the Jade Pavilion meeting." "Oh, Taoist Xiao, this is..." Xian Songzi looked at Xiao Hua in confusion. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. "I'm lost. I can't find where the Jade Pavilion is." "Ha!" Xian Songzi laughed. This was the first time he saw a Taoist cultivator who was lost, not to mention a nascent soul cultivator. Taoist Xiao, please land the flying carriage. Let's see where this is. Xiansong Zi was now a nascent soul cultivator, so he could only use his nascent soul to explore. After Xiao Hua landed the flying carriage, Xiansong Zi looked to the left and pointed, Taoist Xiao, you went the wrong way. You should fly in that direction. Thank you, fellow Taoist Xiansong. Xiao Hua also smiled and urged the Pegasus to fly towards the Jade Pavilion once again. After flying for a while, the atmosphere in the flying carriage became a little awkward. Xiao Hua looked at Xiansong Zi, who didn't close his eyes to meditate, but had a flicker in his eyes as he looked at him from time to time. He asked Taoist Xiansong, since things have come to this, it's useless to think too much about it. I'd better look forward. After all, it's better to have a nascent soul than to have a nascent soul obliterated. Yes, I understand, Xiansong Zi hurriedly said, but with my current situation, I really can't do anything about it. That's right. What do you plan to do in the future? Xiao Hua couldn't help but feel pity in his heart. He knew that this question of his definitely had a cause and effect, but in the end, he still spoke. When Xiansong Zi heard this, he hastily stood up and looked at Xiao Hua. He clenched his teeth and was about to kneel down. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua had already waved his hand and stopped him from kneeling down. He smiled and said, Fellow Taoist Xiansong, if there's anything you want to say, feel free to say it to me. If I can help, I'll help. Xiansong Zi's face was slightly red, and he said bitterly, to be able to meet Taoist Master Xiao is Ai's fortune. Not only did Taoist Master save Ai, you also didn't have any thoughts of enslaving Ai. This is really the luck that I cultivated in my previous lives. Now that I've met Taoist Master Xiao, then in the future, I can't help but rely on Taoist Master. In my opinion, I don't have anything to make a deal with Taoist Master. I'm willing to swear a blood oath and serve Taoist Master for 1,000 years as the price for my survival. Of course, I also hope that fellow Taoists could do a few things for I in consideration of being a slave to I. Swear a hard oath? Serve for 1,000 years? Xiao Hua blinked his eyes and looked at the 1-foot-long nascent soul. If it was a nascent soul without a nascent soul, Xiao Hua wouldn't mind. But what's there to command about a nascent soul with a nascent soul? Moreover, if he really agreed, from Xiansong Zi's words, what would he have to do for him? Forget it, forget it. Xiao Hua didn't like trouble and hurriedly waved his hand. Fellow Taoist is still a nascent soul cultivator. How can you lower yourself? Moreover, I don't like to order others around, so there's no need to mention this. But, Xiansong Zi was a bit tongue-tied. Oh, if you're afraid of being ordered around by others, then in order to survive, you can stay by this Xiao's side. It doesn't matter. Xiao Hua hurriedly said, when you feel that you can leave, just tell this Xiao. Taoist Master Xiao. Xiansong Zi was almost about to cry. He had cultivated for 1,000 years and had never seen such a righteous Taoist cultivator. Is this still a Taoist cultivator? This wasn't much. When Xiao Hua said the second sentence, Xiansong Zi really felt that happiness had come too quickly. Oh, if you have anything you want to do, I can also say it. Of course, it can't be too difficult. Otherwise, I can't do it. Xiao Hua said with a smile, as if he was sure that he could help Xiansong Zi. Really? Xiansong Zi was shocked by happiness to the point that his brain couldn't function properly. After a while, he said, Taoist Master doesn't want any price. What price? Xiao Hua waved his hand and said, what fellow Taoist wants me to do is naturally how to cultivate my nascent soul. This kind of thing, it's naturally useful to I, right? I can also do it in advance, just in case. Yes. Xiansong Zi hurriedly nodded. Naturally, Taoist Master Xiao doesn't need to personally take revenge. What I want fellow Taoists to do is, of course, to protect my nascent soul cultivation and consider how to cultivate a scattered soul. Scattered soul? Xiao Hua blinked his eyes. He really hadn't heard of scattered soul. Fellow Taoist, have you heard of scattered immortals? Songzi wasn't surprised and said, "Scattered soul is somewhat similar to scattered immortals. Never heard of it." Xiaohua's answer really surprised Songzi. Cough, cough. Songzi coughed twice and said with a smile, "Taoist Master Zhao's cultivation is profound, and your future is immeasurable. Naturally, you don't need to know about such trivial things. I've only heard of scattered cultivators. Tell me, what are scattered immortals and scattered souls?" Xiaohua looked around and said, "Right now, we're still far away from the Jade Pavilion gathering. Let's talk for now." Okay. Songs didn't have any power to refuse Xiaohua and slowly said. Following Songzi's explanation, Xiaohua gradually understood that the so-called scattered immortals were immortals in the immortal world who hadn't been granted an official position. At that time, the immortal world seemed to have some connection with the cultivation world. From time to time, there would be news from the immortal world. Moreover, there were many cases of people ascending to the immortal world. Loose immortals and righteous immortals had completely different influences in the cultivation world. Later, the connection between the immortal world and the cultivation world was cut off, and there was no more news from the immortal world. In the eyes of cultivators, there was no difference between righteous immortals and scattered immortals. Immortals had the future of ascending to the Mahayana realm. Afterwards, scattered immortals had a new meaning. They were cultivators who had cultivated to the crossing tribulation stage, but hadn't passed the heavenly tribulation and lost their physical body in the heavenly tribulation. However, they were lucky enough to leave behind a nascent soul. If these cultivators had passed the heavenly tribulation, their physical body would disappear and they wouldn't be able to enter the heavenly realm. However, if they hadn't passed the heavenly tribulation, their nascent soul would be left behind. This kind of awkward situation was different from immortals, so they were called scattered immortals. A scattered immortal's nascent soul had a part of the heavenly tribulation's power, which formed the so-called immortal chi. However, it was also because there was no immortal chi in the cultivation world that it was difficult for scattered immortals to improve their cultivation. The most troublesome thing for scattered immortals was that the nascent soul had the power of the heavenly tribulation. Every once in a while, a heavenly tribulation would appear. The power of the heavenly tribulation would increase again and again until the immortal chi in the scattered immortal's body was completely purified. In fact, cultivators who had truly passed the heavenly tribulation could rely on their physical body to absorb immortal chi. When the immortal chi in their body was enough, they could ascend to the immortal world. However, scattered immortals didn't have physical bodies and could only use the heavenly tribulation to cultivate. They could gather the immortal chi in their body to reach the limit that the cultivation world couldn't accommodate. Of course, this process was extremely painful and dangerous. Each heavenly tribulation wasn't inferior to the initial heavenly tribulation. If a scattered immortal couldn't pass any of the heavenly tribulations, they would turn into ashes. Of course, this kind of hard work also had a huge harvest. After ordinary scattered immortals ascended to the immortal world, their strength would far surpass ordinary immortal world cultivators, and they would be valued in the immortal world. As for the scattered nascent soul that Songzi wanted to cultivate, it was also compared to the normal cultivation method and was even inferior to that of a scattered immortal. Scattered nascent soul was merely borrowing the cultivation method of a scattered immortal. After a cultivator lost their physical body, they relied on a unique cultivation method to cultivate using the nascent soul method and finally reached the heavenly tribulation stage. However, even if a scattered nascent soul cultivator transcended the heavenly tribulation, they could only be a scattered immortal. It was impossible to obtain enough immortal chi in one heavenly tribulation. In particular, scattered nascent souls didn't have physical bodies, and it was practically impossible for them to transcend the Deshang heavenly tribulation. The fate of a scattered immortal was miserable, but the fate of a scattered nascent soul was even more miserable. Alas, so that's how it is. After Xiaohua finished listening, he sighed and said, "I thought that loose immortals meant freedom, leisure, and comfort. Who would have known that this loose immortal is similar to loose cultivators who belong to sects and clans? This loose immortal is filled with blood and tears. However, fellow Taoist Xian Songzi, actually with your current realm, you should consider. Xiao Hua actually wanted to say possession, but if Xian Songzi possessed, then what about the person who was possessed? Xian Songzi also didn't avoid Xiao Hua and said with a bitter smile, "There's no need for Taoists to remind me. I naturally know that possession is the best path. However, the problem is that I's nascent soul has already been formed, and an ordinary body wouldn't be able to withstand it. How can a body that can accommodate I's nascent soul be something that I can possess in my current state? Currently, it's already not bad that I can survive. How could I dare to think about anything else? Besides, even if I want to possess, I still have to rely on Taoist Xiao. With Taoist Zhao's character." "Yeah, that's right." Xiao Hua nodded. "I definitely won't allow you to casually harm other people." Chapter 3573. Green-robed Xiao Hua came out as nascent soul and waved his hands, shouting, "Not good, not good." It's like wearing a pair of small shoes, but also like wearing a very sullen Taoist robe. I can't move at all. If the shoes are small, you can make them bigger. If the Taoist robe is small, you can also modify it. Jade Archive, Xiao Hua advised earnestly. "We're poor, so just put up with it." "Put up with what?" Green-robed Xiao Hua rolled his eyes at Jade Archive, Xiao Hua. He pointed at the two nascent soul cultivators and said, "These useless things can't be nourished by the 5 qi righteous thunder. If they were to cultivate slowly, I'm afraid it would take thousands of years. Having is better than not having it." Jade Archive Xiao Hua naturally understood and said, "Also, if you can adapt to this thing, won't you be able to come out and help when I'm in danger? Don't let it be like the 5 brocade cloud painting battle last time. Obviously, everyone can help, but there's no way to go out." Okay. Green-robed Xiao Hua waved his hand. "Fellow Taoist, think of a way yourself. I know you've been thinking about that old bald donkey Guzhun's 200 years of cultivation. Fellow Taoist, don't forget, that's the cultivation path of a Buddhist sect protector. There's no future." Jade Archive Xiao Hua gave a rare embarrassed smile. "I was just thinking about it. Fellow Taoist, you don't have to take it out and embarrass yourself, right? A gentleman is magnanimous." Green-robed Xiao Hua's voice drifted, and his figure disappeared again. Jade Archive Xiao Hua immediately tested it. Sure enough, when the 5 qi righteous thunder touched the nascent souls immediately showed signs of collapse. Helpless, Jade Archive Xiao Hua could only place the two nascent souls outside the 5 qi righteous thunder and slowly nourish them with the true essence in his lower dantian. Xiao Hua took a look at the nascent soul that was flashing with 5 colored threads of qi. He then opened his mouth and a flying sword rushed out. In the blink of an eye, the nascent soul's 5 colored threads of qi were about to be cut in half. Xiao Hua then spat out another mouthful of qi. The nascent soul's body flashed with a faint golden light. The surrounding yuan qi began to gather toward the nascent soul, slowly repairing the previously collapsed skin of the nascent soul. Kill. After the time it took to finish a meal, Xian Songzi's weak nascent soul finally opened its eyes. Without any hesitation, the moment it saw the person in front of it, Xian Songzi's nascent soul's eyes turned red. It rubbed its hands together, and the energy of heaven and earth surged. A powerful spell seal smashed toward the person's head. Xiao Hua had already anticipated this, so he wasn't angry. With a wave of his hand, under the heaven and earth in the sleeve, even Xian Songzi, who was a nascent soul cultivator, felt as if his entire body had sunk into something solid. It was difficult for him to move, let alone mobilize the qi of heaven and earth. Fellow Taoist, this is a dog biting an immortal. You don't know how to appreciate my kindness. Xiao Hua said with a smile. Do you think I'm the Confucian cultivator who killed your physical body and captured your nascent soul? You? You're a Taoist cultivator? At this moment, Xian Zi was only a foot tall. He looked up and down at the giant like Xiao Hua. The hatred in his eyes was gone, but an indescribable fear was born. What caught Xiao Hua off guard was that Xian Zi's hands once again formed a spell seal with great difficulty. Golden light splashed out from Xian Zi's nascent soul. It was actually about to self-destruct. Damn it, you're sick. Xiao Hua was shocked. He angrily cursed and slapped his hand. The nascent soul's hand was displayed and firmly grasped Xian Zi's nascent soul. The nearby chi of heaven and earth was blocked. Xiao Hua's entire body even soared into the sky. He flew straight into the astral winds before stopping. He looked at Xian Zi in his hand with lingering fear. If something went wrong, he would immediately throw Xian Zi into the astral winds. Do you want to die? Xiao Hua coldly said. If you want to die, you only need to nod your head. This Xiao will immediately throw you out. Don't even talk about using some self-destruct technique. As long as you enter the astral winds, your little body that just became a nascent soul will immediately turn into ashes. Although Xian Zi was currently a nascent soul, he couldn't even sense a trace of chi of heaven and earth. Especially his own body, he couldn't move at all. He couldn't even answer Xiao Hua's question. Xiao Hua ignored him and continued to say, I know that your physical body was destroyed by the king of the capital Qin state. You have hatred in your heart, but your deep-rooted hatred should go to the king of the capital Qin state and take revenge on him. Oh, I forgot to tell you. The king of the capital Qin state has already been killed by this Xiao. If you want, you can go kill the other people of the capital Qin state. Of course, even if you kill a Confucian cultivator, this Xiao has no objections. What right do you have to self-destruct in front of your savior? Don't you know that if you self-destruct, this Xiao will also be implicated? If this Xiao knew, this Xiao would have just let that Xian Yin Ming obliterate your nascent soul. Seeing Xiao Hua ramble on for so long, the fear in Xian Zi's nascent soul's eyes slightly disappeared and revealed a pleading expression. Xiao Hua didn't dare to easily relax his vigilance. His nascent soul's hands slightly relaxed as he asked, If you want to die, then nod your head. This Xiao will lend you a hand. If you don't want to die, then shake your head. Xian Zi was somewhat silent as he stared at Xiao Hua. After half a cup of tea's time, he still didn't move. Forget it, forget it. How could Xiao Hua really send Xian Zi's nascent soul into the astral winds? Seeing that Xian Zi didn't speak, he waved his hand and said, Don't struggle. This Xiao was just joking with you, because you really scared this Xiao. How about this? This Xiao will let you go. You can go wherever you want. Even if you want to self-destruct, you can. But wait until this Xiao leaves. Xian Zi's nascent soul's eyes revealed a trace of disbelief, but soon after, he really believed it. Xiao Hua flew for a moment. Seeing that there was no one nearby, he reached out with his nascent soul's hand and threw Xian Zi's nascent soul to the side. Then, he used the wind escape technique and ran far away. When he landed on the flying carriage, Xiao Hua was still muttering. However, when he really urged the heavenly horse, his heart calmed down, and he suddenly realized why Xian Zi was so scared. He then sighed and shook his head. Looking at the heavenly horse flapping its light feathers, his gaze was somewhat unfocused. Of course, it was only for a moment. Xiao Hua raised his voice again and said, Fellow Taoist, why are you following this Xiao for no reason? Whether you live or die has nothing to do with this Xiao. Can you just pretend that you never saw this Xiao? The fellow Taoist Xiao Hua spoke of was none other than Xian Zi, who had used teleportation to land beside the flying carriage. In just a moment, Xian Zi's nascent soul had already become somewhat dim. I wonder if fellow Taoist can let I in for a chat. Xian Zi was somewhat helpless. He seemed to be pleading, but also seemed to be negotiating. Xiao Hua shook his head slightly and said, I'm very sorry. Fellow Taoist is really too dangerous. This Xiao still wants to live for a few more years. If fellow Taoist wants to thank me, then there's no need to say anything. You and I are both Taoist cultivators. To be able to meet you is fate between us. Moreover, this Xiao didn't intend to save you. However, that Xian Yiming also wanted to kill this Xiao, so this Xiao killed him. When I saw that you were captured, I just happened to save you. Fellow Taoist, Xian Songzi sighed and said, if I was captured by a Confucian cultivator or even killed, then all troubles would be over. However, if I was captured by a Taoist cultivator, then I wouldn't be able to reincarnate for 100 lifetimes. Fellow Taoist, don't say. You don't know about this, and don't have such thoughts in your heart. TCH, Xiao Hua flicked his sleeve and said, who do you think this Xiao is? This Xiao naturally knows that capturing a nascent soul can be of great use. It can be used as the tool spirit of a spiritual treasure or eaten to increase one's cultivation. However, does this Xiao need to use such methods? Moreover, if this Xiao wants to use it, why would I need you? That king of the capital Qin state killed more than one nascent soul cultivator. However, you were lucky and your primordial spirit wasn't erased. Fellow Taoist may be straightforward and upright, but there are very few people like you in the Taoist sect. Xian Song Zi bitterly smiled. He knew that what Xiao Hua said was correct. Otherwise, I would immediately be afraid when I saw that fellow Taoist was a Taoist cultivator. It's fine, it's fine. Xiao Hua waved his hand again. This Xiao didn't think about it before, but when I just returned, I already knew. This Xiao doesn't blame you anymore. You can go now. Thank you, fellow Taoist Xiao, for forgiving I. Xian Song Zi's face revealed bitterness. He said again, however, this world is so big. Where can I find a place to stand? If fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't help me, I'm afraid that in less than an hour, I will turn into ashes. Seeing that Xian Song Zi's nascent soul had dimmed a bit as he spoke, Xiao Hua sighed. He knew that Xian Song Zi's nascent soul had just been born and couldn't withstand the impact of the energy of heaven and earth. It couldn't withstand the wind and rain of heaven and earth. If he really ignored Xian Song Zi, 1,000 years of hard work would disappear in an instant. Come in. Xiao Hua was soft-hearted in the end. He waved his hand, and the restriction on the flying carriage dispersed. Xian Song Zi revealed a happy expression and entered in a flash. After the restriction on the flying carriage was restored, Xiao Hua still didn't feel at ease. He flicked his finger again, and several rays of light flashed around Xian Song Zi's nascent soul. Xian Song Zi immediately felt several warm currents surging around him. Xiao Hua clapped his hand and took out several pieces of top-grade nascent stones. He asked, do you still want more nascent stones? Thank you, fellow Taoist Xiao. Xian Song Zi was overjoyed. He waved his hand, and a black, earth-type top-grade nascent stone fell in front of him. As Xian Song Zi hugged it with his two small hands, that nascent stone shrank visibly. When that nascent stone disappeared, Xiao Hua took out another earth-type nascent stone and asked fellow Taoist, do you still want more? Ah, thank you, fellow Taoist Xiao. Xian Song Zi smiled bitterly. I only have so many nascent stones. If I use any more, I'll be full. After all, a nascent soul is still a nascent soul. Without a body tempering nascent stones, these nascent stones can only be a kind of supplement. Xiao Hua nodded and put away the nascent stones. Xian Songzi looked at the flying carriage and Pegasus and bowed. Fellow Taoist Xiao, I'm Xian Songzi. May I know your Taoist name? Oh, so it's fellow Taoist Xian Songzi. I'm Xiao Hua. My Taoist name is Taoist Xiao. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly returned the greeting. So it's Taoist Xiao. I've been disrespectful. Xian Songzi said respectfully. Previously, I was too impetuous. Now, I formally thank Taoist Xiao for saving my life. Ah, no need to be polite. Xiao Hua waved his hand. Actually, I didn't save your life. Chapter 3574. Hearing Xiao Hua's words, Xian could only helplessly reply. Therefore, this poor Taoist's current plan can only be to scatter my nascent soul, and when there's a chance in the future, I'll think about taking over the body. Since there is a path, there is an end. Fellow Taoist Xian Songzi, if you cultivate scattered nascent soul and scattered immortal, I will definitely support you no matter how difficult it is. Xiao Hua looked at Xian Songzi and said word by word. But if you take over, I may not. Xiao Hua didn't say anything more. He believed that Xian Songzi would understand his meaning. Xian Songzi didn't know where Xiao Hua's confidence came from, but he was inexplicably moved. He cupped his hands and said, I don't dare to have extravagant hopes for the future. I only want to get through the current difficulties first. That's true. Take one step at a time. You don't have to worry too much about the future. Xiao Hua knew that Xian Songzi's mood wasn't good right now, so he didn't want to comfort him. He just casually said some words. Unexpectedly, Xian Songzi said seriously, Taoist Master Xiao, you don't know, all of this is the will of the heavens. Will of the heavens? Xiao Hua was stunned. He was somewhat baffled. As early as 600 years ago, Xian Songzi's tone was somewhat aged, his gaze looking towards the clouds in front of the flying carriage, as if he was reminiscing. I had just cultivated to gold core. In order to find a suitable cultivation method, I killed many Taoist cultivators. In the end, I finally obtained a cultivation method suitable for I from an unknown cultivator, and in this cultivator's small Chinquan pouch, I also obtained an incomplete ink cloud pupil. What was recorded inside was the cultivation method for scattered immortals. There was also a so-called scattered nascent soul cultivation method. It must be the cultivation experience of some scattered immortal senior. Speaking up to here, Xian Songzi was silent for a moment, then continued. At that time, I felt that this secret technique was really inconceivable, and this thing was really boring, so I almost threw it away, but thinking that it was left behind by a scattered immortal senior, it could be considered precious, and I had never heard of scattered immortals before. I kept it. I didn't expect that the cause from 600 years ago would actually bear fruit today. No wonder you know about scattered immortals. Xiao Hua sighed again. Taoist has actually obtained this ink cloud pupil. When fellow Taoist brought it up today, this Xiao still feels that I'm ignorant and inexperienced. Bodiless immortals are called immortals, but they actually live miserable lives. They live in fear every day, afraid that the heavenly tribulation will descend. That's why they do everything they can to find a way to avoid the tribulation and a way to deal with it. There are very few of them in the first place, so how can they appear in front of people? Xian Songzi nodded. Even if I knew about this, I've never seen a bodiless immortal before, and I've never heard anyone mention it. Xiao Hua pinched his chin and said, That's right, according to what I know, as long as one can't pass the heavenly tribulation, no matter if it's the physical body or the nascent soul, both will turn into ashes. It's unlikely that the nascent soul will be tougher than the physical body and be able to escape the heavenly tribulation. There's always a way out. There's always an exception. Xian Songzi smiled. 10,000 years later, I'll show you this exception. Good, this Xiao will wait and see. Xiao Hua said with a smile. I wonder how this Xiao can help you now? Tell me about it. That Mo Yun Tong is an I's Chinquan bag. If you killed that bastard Xian Yanming, Mo Yun Tong must be in your hands. Xian Songzi smiled and said, Moreover, I's natal magic treasure, the Hanging Mountain Pagoda, should also be in your hands. Now that I can't stay outside for long, I can only rely on the Hanging Mountain Pagoda to survive. Oh, I understand. Xiao Hua waved his hand and took out Xian Yiming's Chinquan bag. He handed it to Xian Songzi and said, It should all be inside. Take it yourself. Taoist. Xian Songzi smiled bitterly. Now that I don't have the strength to trust a chicken, I have to rely on Taoist for everything. Even that nascent soul cultivation secret technique needs Taoist to pass on to me. Oh, this Xiao understands. Xiao Hua suddenly understood. He knew that when Xian Songzi lost his physical body, he couldn't cultivate any divine abilities. He really had to rely on Xiao Hua to pass on these secret techniques to him first. Therefore, Xiao Hua didn't hesitate. He first looked for Xian Songzi's magic treasure and gave it to Xian Songzi. Xian Songzi hugged the small pagoda with both hands, and his nascent soul flashed with light and faint magic power fluctuations. When the small pagoda also fluctuated, the small pagoda slowly shrank and fell into the nascent soul's hands. Only then did the vigilance on Xian Songzi's face, which had never disappeared, slightly relax. Then, Xiaohua looked for Xian Songzi's shabby mo yuntong. Fortunately, although there were many things in Xian Yinming's Qingquan pouch and Xian Songzi, it didn't care about the mo yuntong before. Xian Yinming had just obtained it from Xian Songzi. Xian Yinming didn't have time to deal with it, so Xiaohua only spent a little effort to find it. After obtaining Xian Songzi's consent again, Xiaohua placed the mo yuntong on his forehead and carefully looked at it. Then he stretched out his hand, and a faint crystal thread appeared on his index finger. He touched the forehead of Xian Songzi's nascent soul. Xian Songzi's nascent soul rapidly trembled, unable to withstand the power of Xiaohua's touch. Xiaohua was helpless. He could only pass on less than 30% of the mo yuntong's contents, which were suitable for Xian Songzi's current situation. Even so, Xian Songzi's expression became dispirited after reading this, and the luster of his nascent soul dimmed again. Fellow Taoist Xian Song. Xiaohua frowned and said, "Now you need to cultivate." This Xiao has also seen the contents of the mo yuntong. This Xiao will do his best to find suitable spiritual herbs and spiritual items for you, so that you can continue to cultivate. However, the spiritual items you need are really rare. To tell you the truth, this Xiao has never heard of them before. This Xiao doesn't dare to guarantee. Taoist Xiao, thank you for your trouble. Xian Songzi was really out of breath. He said in a low voice, "Those things are called ancient things. Perhaps they have changed their names after being passed down. Unfortunately, there are no diagrams. I will leave everything to Taoist Xiao. Now, I will enter the suspended mountain pagoda to cultivate. If Taoist Xiao has any news or any errands, you can take out the suspended mountain pagoda." Yes, fellow Taoist Xian Song can rest assured. This Xiao's luck has always been very good. Perhaps I will be able to find the items that fellow Taoist needs very soon. Xiao Hua said with a smile. Fellow Taoists can rest assured and cultivate in seclusion. Many thanks, many thanks. At this time, no amount of gratitude was enough. Xian Songzi said a few words. His entire yuanying flashed with an earthen yellow brilliance, causing the suspended mountain pagoda to also shine brightly. Soon after, the yuanying slowly fell into the suspended mountain pagoda and disappeared. Xiaohua looked at the suspended mountain pagoda in front of him that had lost its brilliance and fell onto the flying carriage. He secretly sighed. A yuanying cultivator who had cultivated for more than 1,000 years had fallen into such a state in just one day. It really made one's heart cold. Xiaohua was worried about Xian Songzi's mood, so he didn't ask about Xian Songzi's origin. Because he was worried about the condition of Xian Songzi's yuanying, Xiaohua didn't ask about the situation of the Jade Pavilion gathering. The suspended mountain pagoda couldn't be put into the space. Xiaohua carefully put it into his Qingquan bag. Then, without caring about the Pegasus, he clapped his hand and took the mo yuntong in his hand. He placed it on his forehead and carefully examined it. In fact, as early as when Xian Songzi talked about the cultivation method of loose immortals, Xiaohua's heart was moved. This cultivation method was very similar to his current yuanying cultivation method. Now, Xiaohua's yuanying was growing vigorously under the bombardment of the 5 Qi righteous thunders. Wasn't it the same as a loose immortal, increasing immortal spiritual force through the lightning tribulation? However, Xiaohua's 5 Qi righteous thunders didn't release immortal spiritual force. Moreover, the 5 Qi righteous thunders were also under Xiaohua's control, so they wouldn't be a threat to yuanying. In fact, Xiao Hua still didn't understand why the 5 Qi righteous thunders could promote the growth of yuanying. Could it be because the 5 Qi righteous thunders were an item of the immortal palace and contained immortal spiritual force? But no matter how he thought about it, there was a problem. The immortal palace wasn't the immortal world, and the immortal palace of a Confucian cultivator wasn't the immortal palace of a Taoist sect. Of course, since Xiansong Zi's yuanying could cultivate a loose, immortal soul, then the 2 yuanying without primordial spirits that Xiao Hua obtained could also cultivate a loose, immortal soul under the support of the green-robed Xiao Hua and the other primordial spirits. This temptation made Xiao Hua's heart pound. However, after looking at it for a moment, several divine senses swept over the flying carriage, which attracted Xiao Hua's attention again. Xiao Hua thought for a moment, then threw Mo Yuntong to Dragon Vein Xiao Hua to take a look. He stood up, put his hands behind his back, and looked in the direction where the divine senses swept over. The direction where the divine senses swept over wasn't where the Jade Pavilion was, but where Xiao Hua was about 100 miles away. After Xiao Hua let the heavenly horse slow down its flying speed, in just the time it took to eat a meal, 3 cultivators wearing Taoist robes came over. The one in front was an old man with white hair and a beard. Below him was a pigeon-like bird, but this pigeon was about 2 zhang in size. The pigeon's face looked fierce, and when its wings flapped, it set off a powerful airflow. This old man had a red face, a pair of broom-like eyebrows, and leopard-shaped eyes. He looked majestic without being angry, which was quite a match for the bird below him. The 2 cultivators behind the old man were slightly younger, but their hair was also white, and their eyebrows were quite weathered. One of them was on a flying boat, and the other was on a flying sword. Although their faces were not very fierce, there was also a kind of powerful momentum in their eyes. It seemed that the 3 of them were not ordinary people. Fellow Taoist, although the 3 of them had already scanned Xiao Hua with the divine senses, now that they really saw Xiao Hua, they saw that Xiao Hua was so young, and they couldn't see Xiao Hua's strength even when using spells. They couldn't help but look at each other. The person in front hurriedly stood up from the back of the pigeon, cupped his hands, and said, "I'm Chan Yu of Qingzhou, Qingyan Ridge. I wonder if you're going to the Jade Pavilion meeting?" Xiao Hua naturally returned the salute and said with a smile, "I'm Xiao Hua of Black Cloud Ridge in Yuzhou, and I'm going to the Jade Pavilion meeting." Could it be that the 3 of you are also going to the Jade Pavilion meeting? Haha, yes, that's right. Hearing this, Chan Yu raised his thick eyebrows and laughed. It's better to meet by chance than by invitation. We are really fated. That's, Xiao Hua said with a smile. Now that we are close to the Jade Pavilion, if the cultivators we meet are not going to the Jade Pavilion meeting, that would be strange. Chapter 3575. Come. Chan Yu seemed to be very straightforward. He pointed to the 2 people behind him and said, "These are the 2 fellow Taoists I met on the way. The 4 of us are going to the Jade Pavilion together. It's really lively. I'm Zhu Qingli from Yangzhou Ruins Mountain. Greetings to fellow Taoist Xiao." The person on the flying boat also had a smile on his face. The person on the flying sword next to him, although he looked a little unwilling, reluctantly cupped his hands and said, "I'm Wu Tianxin from Yangzhou's Panshan Cave." I'm very happy to see you 2 fellow Taoists." Xiao Hua smiled and cupped his hands, not because their cultivation was low. Ignore old Wu's dead face. Chan Yu looked at Wu Tianxin's appearance and didn't find it strange. He said to Xiao Hua, "When you saw me before, he was also like that. Later, I heard from other fellow Taoists that he was originally like this. I don't know how many fellow Taoists he offended, but he didn't change. It's no wonder fellow Taoist Wu is like this." Zhu Qingli hastily explained. He didn't intend to participate in the Jade Pavilion gathering. "However, I've encountered a bottleneck in my cultivation. It just so happens that a small country wants me to stand up for them. So I dragged fellow Taoist Wu to the Jade Pavilion." Xiao Hua smiled, touched his nose, and said, it seems. I've never said that I care, right? Everyone has their own nature. As long as they don't hinder others, it's fine. Previously, when I saw the three of you aggressively chasing after me, I thought you three fellow Taoists had bad intentions. Now that I see you three fellow Taoists being so friendly, I've just calmed down. How could I care? Chang Yu smiled embarrassedly. He didn't seem to be embarrassed. Presumably, he didn't have any dirty thoughts before. He looked at the Pegasus in front of Xiaohua and said, even if we have some plans, seeing that fellow Taoist Xiao dares to ride such a Pegasus, you should think about it in your heart, right? Besides, on the hidden immortal continent, our Tao sect has declined and is suppressed by Confucian cultivators. Even if we want to rule a country, we have to come to the Jade Pavilion to give face to Confucian cultivators. In this case, even if I can take fellow Taoist Pegasus, so what? Wouldn't it be better to directly kill a Confucian cultivator? Haha, fellow Taoist Chang is rather straightforward. Xiaohua laughed. All you know is fighting and killing. Wu Tianxin said coldly. You kill me, I kill you. Sooner or later, both sides will suffer. The more I walk, the more scared I am. Fellow Taoists, listen to me. This Jade Pavilion gathering is definitely not a place to be taken lightly. While we haven't entered yet, we'd better get out of here as soon as possible. Old Wu, Chang Yu was not surprised. It seemed that he had heard these words several times. He turned back and said, you are already in the middle stage of the Gold Core Realm. If you want to enter the late stage of the Gold Core Realm, have you prepared all the spiritual herbs and medicinal pills you need? I've already reached the bottleneck of the late Gold Core stage, but I've only prepared less than 30% of the things needed to conceive a nascent soul. If this goes on, I won't be able to conceive a baby within my lifespan. Instead of waiting for death like this, why don't I go to the Yaotai Palace and fight? Fellow Taoist Wu, Senior Chang is right. Aren't you in an awkward situation now? Those spiritual herbs are useless for the cultivation of Confucian cultivators, but they have the spiritual herbs in their hands. Even if they ask great alchemists to refine them into ordinary medicines, they won't give them to us. If we don't have the support of a country and recruit disciples as the state preceptor, how can our cultivation progress further? If we take 10,000 steps back and die, won't we have no disciples at all? How can the inheritance of our Taoism continue? Zhu Chengli and the other two obviously argued a lot on the way, and today they argued again. It's easy for you and me to leave today, but maybe we'll have to come here again 10 years later. 10 years. These 10 years are nothing in our eyes. Maybe fellow Taoist Wu doesn't care, but in Senior Chang's eyes, these 10 years are a matter of life and death. How can he have 10 more years? If Senior Chang is like this, who knows when we'll be like this? Therefore, we should cherish every day and night on the road of cultivation. Do you think I don't know? Wu Tianxin rolled his eyes and said, I don't want to come to the Jade Pavilion because I want to save time for cultivation, right? Without elixirs and primordial stones, what can you do even if you have time? Chang Yu said with a smile. Facing Chang Yu, Wu Tianxin didn't dare to be as merciless as he was to Zhu Chengli. He could only smile bitterly and said, I don't think we can get anything more when we arrive at the Jade Pavilion. There's obviously a dark shadow in this Jade Pavilion gathering. What right do Taoist cultivators have to tell us what to do? Not to mention that a single state preceptor's lot can lead several Taoist cultivators to fight each other. Even if Taoist cultivators want the approval of Confucian cultivators to become state preceptors, we can see that Confucian cultivators are harboring evil intentions. Fellow Taoist Wu, you think too much. Zhu Chengli obviously didn't agree with Wu Tianxin's thoughts. He shook his head and said, the Jade Pavilion gathering has existed for many years in the hidden immortal continent, and many Taoist cultivators have become state preceptors. If there's a dark shadow, why don't others say it? Look at Senior Chang. Isn't he only willing to come to the Jade Pavilion gathering because the monarch of a country begged Senior Chang to become his disciple? In my opinion, there's nothing in this world that isn't a secret. Even if there are some secrets in the Jade Pavilion gathering, it's normal. Actually, if fellow Taoist doesn't want to participate in the Jade Pavilion gathering, you can find a Taoist country and cultivate under the state preceptor. It's also possible. Xiao Hua's heart moved, and he interrupted. Wu Qianxin curled his lips and said self-deprecatingly, "With my temper, how can I please others? Since I can't be their direct disciple, it's better for me to cultivate on my own." Forget it, forget it. Let's not talk about it anymore, Chang Yu said with a smile. The four of us met for a reason. I don't know who will get the state preceptor's lot, but I can guarantee that as long as I can take charge of a country, I can ask the three of you to come out and help. Hee. Thank you so much, Senior Chang. Zhu Qingli was very happy. He cupped his hands and thanked him. As for Xiao Hua and Wu Tianxin, they both smiled and didn't say much. Let's go, Xiao Hua said with a smile. I still have the same words. Everyone has their own thoughts, and everyone has their own fate. No one can force anyone. Since we've come to the edge of the Jade Pavilion, we'd better go and take a look first. No matter what, this is a real grand meeting of our Taoist sect. Yes, even if fellow Taoist doesn't want to go in, it's possible to find things for cultivation. Zhu Qingli nodded again and again. Xiao Hua was stunned and asked curiously, Fellow Taoists, do you mean that there are still auctions in the Jade Pavilion gathering? Why haven't I heard of it? It's not to the extent of auctions, Chang Yu said with a smile. I've heard that there are some ordinary exchanges, which have gradually started in the past 200 years. After all, our Taoist sect cultivators are in the minority. In the ordinary auctions in the hidden immortal continent, our Taoist sect cultivators use very few things. Now that we have a rare opportunity to gather together, each of us must have something that others want, but we don't need. Not bad. Xiao Hua smiled. Wasn't this the small trade gathering in the morning rain continent? It was exactly the opportunity he liked. The Jade Pavilion was a mountain and an extremely high mountain peak. However, the mountain range around the Jade Pavilion mountain was extremely vast. At a glance, it was thousands of miles and tens of thousands of miles. It was several times larger than the territory of an ordinary country in the hidden immortal continent. However, as the ancients said, the mountain was famous not because of its height, but because of its immortal. The water was famous not because of its depth, but because of its dragon. Although the Jade Pavilion mountain was only a mountain peak, this mountain peak represented the mountain range that stretched for tens of thousands of miles. In front of the Jade Pavilion mountain, the entire mountain range had no other name. However, even though the Jade Pavilion gathering was called the Jade Pavilion, it was also a grand meeting where Taoist sect cultivators gathered. However, the place where the Imperial Tutor's lot was truly obtained was not the Jade Pavilion mountain. After the Jade Pavilion mountain, within the endless mountain range, there seemed to be no place where the Imperial Tutor selection was not held. The entire mountain range was a place where Star-Lord Hall could freely display their abilities. 10 years ago, the selection competition might be held in a river. This year, it could be held in an ancient tree on the mountain peak. 10 years later, it could also be held in an inconspicuous cave. As for where it would be held 20 years later, it would depend on Star-Lord Hall's interest. Not only was the location of the selection different, even the selection method was not the same. Sometimes a Taoist sect cultivator would sign up within a set time. Then, Star-Lord Hall would randomly group these cultivators together. In the end, some cultivators who won would obtain the Imperial Tutor's lot. Sometimes, all the Taoist sect cultivators would be divided into several groups. Every group would produce the Imperial Tutor's lot. There were even times when Star-Lord Hall did not choose the first few winners. Instead, they would first determine the rankings of the cultivators and then randomly draw a number. Whichever number was drawn, the corresponding cultivator would obtain the Imperial Tutor's lot. In particular, the number of the Imperial Tutor's lot in each Yaotai meeting was not always certain. Sometimes it was dozens, sometimes it was hundreds, and so on. Of course, among the many variables in the Yaotai meeting, there was one that was eternal. That was, no matter how the cultivators who entered the Yaotai meeting died, no one would care. In short, The Yaotai meeting was the rhythm of Star-Lord Hall, using all the methods in the entire mountain range, and using the Imperial Tutors, Lot, as bait to kill the Taoist sect cultivators who participated in the Yaotai meeting. But even so, whether it was those who could see the essence, or those who could not see the essence, or those who had a plan in their heart, or those who had a fluke in their heart, the Tao sect cultivators of the 9 regions of the hidden immortal continent still appeared in the vicinity of Yaotai Mountain like carps crossing the river. How could Xiaohua not be one of them? Xiaohua, Chang Yu, and the others flew like this for a few days. After exchanging what they knew, they finally understood why Immortal Li Xiang did not tell them the specific situation of the Yaotai meeting. Because everything could not be used as reference, and all the experiences could be the cause of death. Only in the Yaotai meeting, it was really wise to deal with all changes by sticking to the status quo. Chapter 3576. As for Chang Yu and the other two, they were even more shocked. Although the past few days had not been long, and they were still unable to see through Xiao Hua's cultivation, Wu Tianxin had inadvertently asked a few difficult questions about cultivation. He had originally wanted to ask Chang Yu for advice, but before Chang Yu could finish, Xiao Hua had mercilessly refuted him. Chang Yu was naturally unconvinced and brought out a few of his doubts to discuss. In the end, Xiao Hua did not have too many reservations and answered them in detail. So much so that other than Xiao Hua asking about the situation of the Jade Pavilion gathering and the situation of Qingzhou and Yangzhou, the 3 of them took turns to ask Xiao Hua for advice most of the time. In the distance, a bluestone mountain stood between heaven and earth like a jade tablet. The edge of the bluestone mountain was an undulating mountain range. The 3 of them were already incomparably respectful to Xiao Hua. Seeing Xiao Hua put away the Pegasus and flying chariot, the 3 of them hurriedly jumped down from the flying beast and flying boat. They put away their flying tools and stood respectfully beside Xiao Hua. Looking at the Yaotai mountain, Xiao Hua could not help but be somewhat stunned. Previously, he had not released his divine perception to explore the Yaotai mountain, so he did not know what they were feeling this time. However, what surprised him was not the Yaotai mountain, but the area under the Yaotai mountain. There were tents everywhere, and around these tents, there were many soldiers and generals in bright armor. The armors of these generals were different, and the military flags around the tents were also different. It was obvious that they were not of the same standard. Seeing Xiao Hua's somewhat surprised expression, Chang Yu hurriedly said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, the vicinity of the Yaotai mountain has been blocked by Confucian cultivators using a defensive formation. You cannot use your divine perception to explore. There are even some places that have counterattacks. Fellow Taoist, please do not forcibly break the formation." Chang Yu's tone was very respectful. Although he did not call Xiao Hua senior, it was no different from facing a senior. "No." Xiao Hua smiled and pointed at the tents. "This Xiao is wondering why there are so many soldiers." "Oh, fellow Taoist Xiao," Zhu Qingli also said, "these are not the soldiers of Star-Lord Palace, nor are they arranged by any Confucian cultivator. These are all sent by various countries. Even many monarchs will come personally. Their goal is to recruit our Taoist cultivators." Some didn't have a big appetite. Whether it was those who participated in the Yaotai meeting or Taoist cultivators who came to watch the fun, as long as they met their requirements, they could get their offerings. Some came for the cultivators who got the Imperial Preceptor's lot. Of course, these countries should be established by Taoist cultivators. On the other hand, the former might have been founded by Confucian cultivators. These monarchs are just recruiting our Taoism cultivators to be their hired thugs. If they're sincere, why would they appear here? Wu Tianxin still spoke in an unsociable manner. No matter what, their presence here represents their attitude. Chang Yu said unhappily. Moreover, their arrival can at least allow some Tao sect cultivators with shallow cultivation to have a place to stay. Old Wu, don't always look at things from the bad side. Xiao Hua smiled and said, "This Yaotai gathering is getting more and more interesting. Indeed, I've heard people talking about it before, but I didn't pay much attention to it. Now, it seems that I've come a little late. Changyu nodded. If I had come in the past, I might have encountered some opportunities. Hee hee, maybe we won't be able to go back. Xiaohua faintly reminded. Oh, this can't be, right? Changyu was stunned. I've never heard of Taoism cultivators who don't participate in the Yaodai gathering disappearing for no reason. If Taoism cultivators who disappear can send messages, can they be called disappearing? Wu Tianxin replied with a somewhat sarcastic tone. Fellow Taoist Xiao, you're thinking too much. Changyu said embarrassedly. Even if the Confucian cultivators have such a plan, I'm afraid they won't really do it. Otherwise, who would come to the Yaotai gathering? Xiaohua shrugged his shoulders, pointed to the sky, pointed to the ground, and pointed to the mountain peak. He said with a smile, Heaven knows, earth knows, Yaotai Mountain knows, but we Taoism cultivators don't know. Changyu wanted to say something again, but he saw a flying boat breaking through the sky from afar. A middle-aged Taoism cultivator was standing on it. So Changyu closed his mouth and stood in the air, waiting. In just a moment, the flying boat approached. Everyone could clearly see that the person on the flying boat was actually a cultivator of the second stage of Yuanli. When the cultivator saw the four people, he immediately bowed and said, Junior greets the four seniors. When Xiaohua and the others saw that this cultivator didn't report his name and flew from the direction of Yaotai Mountain, they already understood something. Changyu raised his hand and said with a smile, No need to be so polite. Are you the reception envoy for the Yaotai gathering? Senior, there is no reception envoy for the Yaotai gathering this time. Junior is only here to give you the tokens to enter the Yaotai Mountain. As for the matter of entering the Yaotai Mountain in 10 days, Senior, please do as you please. As the cultivator spoke, he took out 4 bamboo slips from his bosom and respectfully presented them in front of the 4 people. Xiaohua and the others took them and scanned them with their divine senses. They couldn't see anything special about these bamboo slips. Changyu hurriedly stopped the cultivator who turned around and asked, I want to ask you, since there is no reception envoy, how can we enter the Yaotai Mountain? Where can we wait for these 10 days? As far as I know, at the foot of the Yaotai Mountain, there have always been quiet rooms and caves for the cultivators who come to participate in the Yaodai gathering to rest. Who would have thought that the cultivator himself was completely clueless? He smiled bitterly and said, Senior, this junior really doesn't know. This junior is in charge of everything within sight. Whenever a senior comes, this junior will hand over the token and not ask about anything else. If senior knows where there is a quiet room, senior can go. Forget it, you can go. Changyu naturally wouldn't make things difficult for a junior with second-level essence force. He smiled and waved his hand to indicate that cultivator to go. Only then did he turn around and say to Xiaohua, Fellow Taoist Xiao, this time's Yaodai gathering is really loose. Previously, early gold core stage cultivators weren't allowed to enter the Yaotai Mountain, and this disciple is only at the heartbeat stage. The seniors he mentioned even include spirit tranquil stage disciples. Could it be that this time's Yaodai gathering has more lots for the state preceptor than before? If there are more, won't fellow Taoist Chong be happy? Xiaohua said with a smile. Fellow Taoist Chong will also have the opportunity to get the state preceptor's lot and become the state preceptor. Not at all, not at all. Changyu said with a smile. I only came to try my luck. Fellow Taoist Xiao is the one who is truly confident. Xiaohua smiled and looked around. He said, since there's no restriction on where we can rest, we can just find a place to rest. Fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't know. Changyu explained, during the Yaotai gathering, although Star-Lord Hall didn't send any disciples to maintain order, there won't be any Confucian cultivators near the Yaotai Mountain. After all, this is Star-Lord Hall's face. If we're too far away from the Yaotai Mountain, it might not be safe. Therefore, I think it's better to go to the bottom of the Yaotai Mountain first. Moreover, it's rare for us Tao disciples to gather together. If we're close, won't we be able to move around more? I don't care. I'll listen to fellow Taoist Chang. Xiao Hua had always been casual about this kind of matter and nodded in agreement. Xiao Hua naturally knew about the dangers near the Yaotai Mountain. Even someone as strong as Xian Song Zi had lost his physical body. Chang Yu and the others were simply no match for them. Wu Tianxin and Zhu Chunli naturally didn't have any objections. The three of them followed Chang Yu and slowly descended to the foot of the Yaotai Mountain. Before the four of them arrived, Dao cultivators flew out from the numerous tents surrounding the Yaotai Mountain. However, these cultivators seemed to have a tacit understanding. The ones who flew out first directly flew in front of Xiao Hua and the others. Moreover, the ones who were few steps slower waited in midair. Seniors, please. The one who rushed out first was a short cultivator at the second grade of origin power. When this cultivator arrived in front of Chang Yu, he immediately bowed and said, I was sent by the state preceptor of Yongzhou's Fian Kingdom. I'm here to respectfully wait for Senior. I wonder if Senior is interested in accepting the offerings of my Fian Kingdom? The offerings of my Fian Kingdom. As he spoke, that cultivator very familiarly read out a long list of conditions. Then, he looked at Xiao Hua and the others with a smile. Chang Yu smiled and cupped his hands, saying, Thank your state preceptor on behalf of I. We're here to participate in the Yaodai gathering. Everything can wait until after the Yaodai gathering. All right, Junior understands. This is my Fian Kingdom's token. If Senior is interested, you can use this token to come to my Fian Kingdom. That cultivator didn't say anything else. He respectfully took out 4 swallow-like tokens from his bosom and handed them to Xiao Hua and the others. Xiao Hua smiled and extended his hand to receive them. Chang Yu and the others could only accept them. Then, that cultivator cupped his hands again and flew down. It didn't matter that Xiao Hua accepted the Fian Kingdom's tokens. Then, that cultivator who was waiting in midair stepped forward. This cultivator seemed to have heard Chang Yu's words. Without wasting any time, he took out a ring-shaped token and handed it to Xiao Hua and the others. He respectfully said, The offerings of my Fian Kingdom are all written in the token. Seniors, you'll know at a glance. Junior respectfully awaits Senior's arrival. After saying that, he flew down without any hesitation. Next, Xiao Hua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Dozens of cultivators handed over their tokens one after another. Xiao Hua somewhat refused, but when he saw that those cultivators were also eager, he didn't have the nerve to put down his face and could only accept them. Fortunately, a few other Taoist cultivators flew over from other places. The remaining cultivators wanted to be in the front, so they hurriedly handed over their tokens to the 4 people and hurriedly flew to the others. Looking at the strange token in his hand and thinking about the large pile of tokens in the small Chinquan bag, Xiao Hua's expression was extremely wonderful. This Yaodai gathering hadn't started yet. He hadn't even set foot on Yaotai Mountain yet, but his harvest was already so full. This really made Xiao Hua feel embarrassed. Fellow Taoist Xiao, Chang Yu couldn't help but laugh. He didn't blame him and said, You're too soft-hearted. These countries, you definitely won't go. These tokens are trash. If you refuse at the beginning, the rest of the people may not necessarily follow. Look at those people. They're simply disdainful of these people. Chapter 35:77. As Chang Yu spoke, he pointed at the cultivators who arrived later than them. Sure enough, as Chang Yu said, those cultivators waved their hands and flew away without waiting for the low-level cultivators of the various countries to speak. Some of them even waved their hands, and a gust of wind blew those low-level cultivators away. Xiao Hua helplessly touched his forehead and said with a smile, I'm not soft-hearted, but seeing that we're all Dao sect disciples, I have to be a little lenient. Ha! Wu Tianxin let out a rare laugh and looked at Xiao Hua with interest. Isn't fellow Taoist Xiao being soft-hearted? Although these so-called Dao sect cultivators were the clothing of Dao sect cultivators, their hearts are already Confucian cultivators. They are even Tao sect lackeys cultivated by the various Confucian countries. Perhaps. Xiaohua smiled. In fact, not to mention Tao sect cultivators, even if a few Confucian scholars came over with tokens with smiles on their faces, with Xiaohua's temperament, he might not necessarily refuse. It was just a matter of taking a few more tokens and listening to a few more nonsense words in the air. It was just a small effort. While they were talking, the few Tao sect cultivators behind them passed through the many tents and barracks and flew into Yaotai Mountain. Those low-level cultivators who were recruiting talents didn't seem to be dejected and flew back to their respective barracks as if they had completed their mission. At the side of a small tent, a man in armor looked at Xiaohua in disbelief. There was some hesitation and confusion between his brows, as if he knew Xiaohua. He seemed to want to go over, but at the same time, he seemed to be thinking about something. Zhu Chunli thought differently from the others. With a smile, he said, "When we were waiting for gold core cultivators, those monarchs only sent low-level Tao lead disciples to talk to us. If there are nascent soul cultivators here, I suppose the monarchs of various nations will come personally." Chang Yu waved his hand and motioned for Xiaohua and the others to fly down with him. At the same time, he said, "If fellow Taoists are nascent soul seniors, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. For nascent soul seniors to come here, they must have a plan, and it's unlikely that they will be persuaded by these country lords. Moreover, if these country lords really want to invite nascent soul seniors to be state preceptors, they will have to wait until after the Yaotai conference." After flying past the continuous stretch of tents, they were already close to Yaotai Mountain. However, the scenery of Yaotai Mountain changed once again. The bluestone mountain from before began to become clear. The various sceneries on the mountain were rather eye-catching. There were relaxed green cypresses, waterfalls and small ponds, mountain paths, and even some immortal birds and ferocious beasts spreading their wings and leaping in the forest. However, after flying for a while, the scene gradually blurred. Layers of clouds began to appear in the sky. In the end, the entire Yaotai Mountain was covered by a layer of red clouds. Even the mountain range behind the Yaotai Mountain was connected to the entire sky, tightly covered by the red clouds. Not to mention that the clouds looked like ripples on water to the naked eye. Even divine sense was reflected by the layer of clouds. It was impossible to see the true appearance of the Yaotai Mountain. Confucian cultivators are so generous. He actually set up a defensive formation over the entire Yaotai Mountain range. Xiaohua was somewhat aghast. However, after thinking about it, he understood. This Yaotai conference had been held for who knows how many years. Even if they set up a formation over several kilometers, it should have been completely covered over these years. Under the heavy pressure of the clouds, only a large area at the foot of the Yaotai Mountain could be seen. On this foothill, there were some palaces and some caves. Some of the palaces flickered with splendor, while some of the palaces were completely dark. The caves were the same. Occasionally, cultivators would fly out of the caves. These cultivators would either go to the palaces at the side or fly to a large plain at the foot of the mountain. On this plain, there were numerous pavilions that were less than a dozen feet in size. These pavilions had the same style. They were all square and appeared ordinary. However, they were all built with bluestone. They had doors and windows. Similarly, some of these pavilions were suffused with a bluestone splendor. Lines of talisman characters flickered within the splendor, while others were completely dull. Between the pavilions, there were some commonly seen spiritual trees. Some of them were blooming flowers, some bore fruits, and a strong fragrance assailed the nostrils. Fellow Taoist Xiao. Chang Yu saw that Xiaohua only raised his head to look at the clouds and didn't care about those pavilions and palaces. He reminded in a low voice, "We want to find a suitable, quiet room to rest. Do you think we should live together, or do we cultivate separately?" "Oh, the palaces at the foot of the mountain are reserved for nascent soul stage seniors. The similar pavilions and the quiet rooms in the caves are reserved for other cultivators. As long as there is no light, there will be no one. We can choose whatever we want." Oh, Xiaohua nodded. He withdrew his gaze from the clouds and looked at the seemingly endless pavilions. He said, "What does fellow Taoist Chong think? I think that since we came together, we should help each other 10 days later. Why don't we live together? If something happens, we can take care of each other." Chong Yu looked at the fervent gaze of Zhu Chengli and the absent-minded Wu Tianxin and said, "Okay, we'll do as fellow Taoist Chong says." Xiaohua didn't need to cultivate in any special way, so he nodded in agreement. However, before Chong Yu could say anything, he heard the sound of a tsunami behind him. It was as if a huge wave was coming from afar. Chong Yu was shocked. He hurriedly turned his head and saw that in the distant sky, there was indeed a layer of blue waves. Chong Yu couldn't help but be shocked. "What's going on?" "Nothing special. Take a closer look." Xiaohua frowned and calmly replied. Xiaohua had already released his divine sense. At this time, there were also many strong and weak divine senses sweeping out from all over the Yaotai Mountain. The blue waves were like waves. In just a few breaths, they had already rushed into everyone's field of vision. On the blue waves, a huge ship came with the light. There were more than 10 huge sea turtles around the ship. On the turtles, there were more or less children dressed in Taoist robes. These children were holding flags that emitted a blue light. When the flags were waved, the shells of the sea turtles surged with the color of water. These colors of water connected to each other to form a majestic blue wave. The ship itself also emitted a blue light. This blue light combined with the blue waves of the sea turtles. It was as if the ship was drifting on the sea. Not only that, there were no less than 9 pythons in front of the ship. Each of the pythons was more than 10 feet long. They each spat out a blue light and pulled the ship in the direction of Xiaohua and the others. "Damn it, which senior is this?" Zhu Chengli saw the imposing manner of the ship and couldn't help but cry out. Does a person with this kind of honor still need to participate in the Yaodai conference? As the ship got closer, a beam of light appeared. Another cultivator on the flying ship seemed to want to deliver the token of the Yaotai conference. However, the water on the ship splashed out and the cultivator was sent flying. He couldn't get close to the ship at all. "Hey, who are you? How dare you offend Taoist Yuan Qing's backing?" A child flew out from the sea turtle closest to the cultivator and shouted harshly. The poor cultivator finally managed to stand firm on the flying ship. He cried out in fear, "I'm here to deliver the token of the Yaodai conference to Taoist Yuan Qing. Give it to me." The child stretched out his hand and said, "But..." The cultivator looked at the people on the turtle, as well as the people on the boat, that he couldn't see clearly. It seemed like he wanted to ask how many people were on the boat, but after muttering a few words, he didn't say anything. He reached out and took out a token. Before he could give it to the boy impatiently reached out and the token flew into the boy's hand. The boy didn't say anything and chased after the turtle. "Tsk tisk." Zhu Chengli smacked his lips and said, "A nascent soul senior is really powerful. Hee, let's see what those who want to recruit Taoist cultivators will do." Wu Tianxin looked with interest at the tents behind him that seemed to outnumber the pavilions and said with a smile. Unfortunately, Wu Tianxin was disappointed. The low-level Taoist cultivators from various countries who were flying like butterflies were now hiding in their tents. He didn't see any one of them. "Fellow Taoist Yuan Qing, why are you moving after sitting still for so long?" At this moment, a silver rainbow light streaked across the sky. A young cultivator with a ruddy face stood high in the sky with a horsetail whisk in his hand. Hong Songzi, why are you here?" A very high-pitched voice came from the ship. Then, a similar green water rushed out from the ship. A cultivator with long white eyebrows and a green Taoist robe appeared on the water. "Hong Songzi. This senior is Hong Songzi?" Chong Yu heard from the side and was pleasantly surprised. It seemed that he had admired Hong Songzi for a long time, similar to Chong Yu. Zhu Qingli's face also showed a kind of ecstasy. He pulled on Wu Tianxin's Taoist robe and couldn't suppress his excitement. He said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Wu, this senior is Taoist Yuan Qing?" It's unbelievable that I can see him here. Wu Qianxin was a bit aloof and didn't seem to care. However, his gaze was also looking at the two nascent soul cultivators in the sky. Are these two fellow Taoists very famous? Xiao Hua asked with interest. Of course, Chang Yu said proudly. This Hong Songzi is a cultivator from our Qing province's Cloud Dream Cave. He already had the strength of a nascent soul more than 1,000 years ago. Now, I'm afraid he has already reached the middle of the 4th grade of Essence Force. He is one of the famous Taoist cultivators in our Qing province. One of them? Xiao Hua smiled and asked. Then there must be others. Forgive me for being ignorant, but I wonder who these fellow Taoists are. Of course, Fire Mountain Range's Fairy Huofeng, Golden Jade Valley's young master Shua Jin, Lingyu Country's Taoist Qi Ping, Jia Xian Country's Cloud Dream Fairy, and so on. They're all nascent soul cultivators who are as famous as Senior Hong Songzi. Chang Yu said with great familiarity. Fire Mountain Range? Golden Jade Valley? Xiao Hua frowned. These nascent soul fellow Taoists don't need to be state teachers. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.